That's why you declined cookies? Is that what you think happened? Because I hit yes to the cookies? I thought it was because I started talking about data centers negatively. Our internet overlords hate that. Although what, am I only back on Twitch? I don't think so. Ugh, don't even mention my gas bill. I hate that. I absolutely hate having to deal with stuff like this, but whatever. Those cookies were deadly. Maybe I'll get a cookie. They have these cinnamon buddy cookies at the place near me. Well, not really near me. There's a place in town where they sell coffee and they have these like cinnamon buddy cookies which are delicious. They're like white chocolate and well, cinnamon kind of like snickerdoodle. I love it. Do you love it? Don't say no. Please clap. I'm back now. We are risen. The L Factory. Thank you for the 5 gifted subs. You really should not validate me for dropping the stream. Don't validate me. But what I was actually going to say before I got disconnected so rudely was the fun segment is the Candace Owens response to Andrew Wilson's Copathon. But before that, I guess I wanted to show you 2 videos actually. One of which is maybe fun depending on how you view certain things. The other is the East Palestine video because I don't want to forget that. But yeah, so as part of our coverage of the ongoing dissatisfaction that a lot of communities have started to develop with the data centers that are just popping up all over America, there have been a rash of death threats against the leadership of a lot of cities that are helping to bring these data centers to the community.
Data centers have become this huge flashpoint across the country, and even in some cases, turning violent. A small town in Iowa is just the latest example. Take a look. City leaders delayed this meeting after receiving online death threats over a proposed plan to build a new data center in town. Earlier this year in Indianapolis, someone shot at this councilman's home, leaving this no data center note on his doorstep. Tom Winter's been following this and has more on the troubling trend.
Yeah, Ryan, as you know, for
things are getting crazy out there. He shot at his home and left in what looks like a Ziploc baggie a note from what looks like perforated notebook, the kind with the spiral almost slinky like binding that just says no data centers. Hard to misunderstand that message, right? I want to hear that again.
Death threats over a proposed plan to build a new data center in town. Earlier this year in Indianapolis, someone shot at this councilman's home, leaving this no data center note on his doorstep. Tom Winter's been following this and has more on the troubling trend.
Yeah, Ryan, as you know, for the past year, we've been focused on data centers and we've been focused on the electrical usage. Is there enough power on the grid to be able to supply electricity to not just data centers, but to the homes and businesses that already have them? Is there enough water, enough ability to air condition these data centers that throw off a lot of heat? There's been debate locally about the appearance of these data centers, not exactly masterpieces in architecture. And there's even been, just as recently as this week, discussions about the financing of data centers raised by Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. But the idea of threats over these data centers, particularly focused on politicians, is something, as you suggested, is really starting to come to the forefront here, and is even in one instance involved the FBI. There was an incident in April of this year where 13 shots were fired, as you mentioned, into a Councilman Ron Gibson's home in Indianapolis. The FBI is taking a look at that case. So far, no arrests that we're aware of. You've got an incident just a couple of days ago in Marshall, Michigan, where there was a what's been described as a legitimate or credible death threat there to the city council as they proved a one-year moratorium.
The guy is still on the loose? That's crazy. I just assumed they got him. But 13 shots through the door and he's still on the loose. Of course, it's Kash Patel's FBI. Wow. You might have to give that guy what he wants. I don't know. You might have to give that guy what he wants. What are you going to do, right?
On data centers in Salix, Iowa. There was a discussion in threats that were made following a consideration by the city council there for a one-year data center moratorium, and then additional death threats in Emporia, Kansas, that led to city council members there having virtual meetings, going back to something that hadn't happened, according to people commenting on that decision in the community, hadn't happened going back to COVID. So there are definitely now threats about this. The political violence has been well covered over the last couple of years, and now the question is really the data center issue the key lightning rod here going forward? And are we going to see more threats, and are there going to be arrests as a result of that? It just points to the fact that this is really becoming a heated debate.
Well, I mean, data centers and certainly flock cameras are going to be catalysts for this style of political violence. But I would also say that those are just going to be the most proximate cause that makes people realize that their government is, well, A, spying on them, but B, just not interested in serving them, but only corporations. Like, these data centers are a really, really easy thing for people to like hone in on as a sign of like that impulse within our government, within our local, our state, and with our federal government to do everything at the behest of corporations, even to the detriment of the communities. And so, yeah, probably like people are going to be really upset about these and flock cameras, but it's also just a general dissatisfaction people are feeling that is being materialized in these data centers, which is, of course, dare I say, triggering people. EMPs for everybody. That was one of the things they were supposed to be practicing in the South Korean games, right? Like EMP warfare or EMP mitigation. EMP conspiracies like that, America's going to get EMP'd by one of our adversaries, are very popular amongst certain types of people. EPMD. Oh, I've listened to EPMD in a while. I should go downtown to a bar and listen to EPMD while I bike there, and then have a drink while listening to EPMD. And if anyone walks up to me and says, "What are you doing?" I'm going to be like, listening to EPMD. And you know what? This is actually a great story to parallel with the East Palestine story, because it's really the same thing. Ultimately, it's the government not caring, either Democrats or Republicans, state, federal, or local, depending on where you are, not caring about the community suffering because corporations need to, always be getting their beak wet. So let's hear about this report kept from residents, now revealed, shows toxic levels in East Palestine. I gotta be honest with you, maybe this makes me sound like a psychopath, like a Candace Owens psychopath, but I didn't really need to see a report that tell me that. It just didn't seem like the kind of thing that would result in the place being like not untoxic or whatever, not toxic. And so I kind of just assumed.
All right, now to a News Nation exclusive on a story we've been covering for more than 3 years. After the 2023 train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, where 5 tank cars full of vinyl chloride burned, residents were sick almost immediately, suffering from rashes and nosebleeds and respiratory issues. Well, renowned exposure warnings expert Stephen Petty was hired to come in and test the residents' soil for toxins and analyze all other testing being conducted on behalf of attorneys in a class action lawsuit. His test results and his analysis, which are the most comprehensive data set yet to date, have never been released to the public. Our investigative correspondent Rich McHugh obtained those results and spoke exclusively with Petty about.
Shouldn't it be illegal to like have results that show that people are being like poisoned and not release them? Don't you think that should be illegal? I don't know. I guess we're going to find out about it. I will say, I hope they clarify that the train cars didn't like set on fire for no reason. They burned them on purpose, because the way she said it, it made it sound like the train cars kind of just derailed and then they caught on fire. But if I recall correctly, that's not what happened. They purposely burned like the vinyl chloride because it was, I guess, easier than cleaning it up, or they didn't want it to seep into like, I can't imagine the justification because it just seems like a terrible idea. I can only imagine that it had to be like cheaper in some way.
His findings. Rich joins us now from East Palestine. This is a big deal, Rich. What did you learn?
Yeah, this is a huge deal, Elizabeth. You know, I think this is by far one of the most important, if not the most important story we have reported from East Palestine since this all began. You know, Petty's data paints an alarming picture of the reality here in East Palestine, and this is the first time any of it is coming to light. When they chose to burn 5 tankers full of vinyl chloride over East Palestine, the black plume of toxins looked biblical. It smothered the region within minutes. Residents were sick almost immediately.
My eyes feel like they're gonna fall out of my head.
The creeks running through town, horribly contaminated. Renowned exposure warnings expert Stephen Petty came to test the soil and water for residents. Petty has testified as an expert witness in over 400 cases.
But the problem by releasing it the way they did is they're going to create an air, soil, and water pollution problem. Guaranteed.
The CDC gave residents a sober assessment of the situation.
One thing that we can agree on, the exposure happened. It happened. We have symptoms.
Petty had been hired by class action attorneys as their testing expert. And when they negotiated a $600 million settlement with Norfolk Southern, they did not release Petty's results, even to their own clients. We have obtained Petty's results, and he agreed to speak with us. Are there carcinogens in the soil in East Palestine?
Yes.
No doubt about it.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, of course.
Very high level?
Above screening levels, which means you can't walk away from it.
So fair for residents to be concerned?
Of course.
Petty says his testing data and the others he analyzed show they detected dioxins and PAHs, some of the most carcinogenic compounds on the planet, above cancer screening levels set by the EPA, which requires further testing and analysis.
Somewhere between 50 and 70% of the data points, whether they be for dioxins or for PAHs, exceeded screening levels.
Cancer screening levels?
Cancer screening levels. That means that you can't just walk away. You have to do something. You have to do further analysis to see what needs to be done from a remediation standpoint, and you also have to do further analysis to determine what it means for people in that environment. We can't just walk away from those results. There is a problem there.
Did they walk away from the results,
testing expert
though?
Scott Smith also came to test on his own. He found elevated levels of dioxins as well.
It's astounding in that it was suppressed. 49% of the testing exceeds the EPA cancer screening level. 70% of Stephen Petty's data and analysis shows polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons above the EPA cancer screening level. It lines up exactly with my data.
Residents we spoke with say that's not what class action attorneys told them.
Petty's test results were always really secret. They said it would hurt the case.
They told me that in my home, basically that the numbers didn't support the outcome of the 600 million. The numbers weren't bad enough, and if they revealed them to the court, the 600 million may not even go through. Because the contamination levels were not bad enough.
Linda Murphy shared a recording with us from that meeting with class counsel.
The data is nowhere near as bad as we thought it was going to be when this first happened. It's almost unprovably bad. The chemicals did not persist long enough at quantities that will expose people over the necessary period of time to produce long-term health effects that are associated directly to this exposure.
Austin Druckenbrod says he asked his attorney about both.
This is why the government is also so harsh on native land protectors, so harsh on the people going after like Cop City. We're always entrapping eco-terrorists. They're They're poisoning people ultimately, and they don't care because it's profitable. It's profitable to poison people.
Scott Smith and Stephen Petty's test results.
And he said they're hacks, and Scott Smith doesn't know what he's talking about, and neither does Stephen Petty. And he said, don't believe them.
We've reviewed text messages from his attorney that appear to back up what he's saying.
These attorneys told them that the Stephen Petty information would not support the claims. And that is not true.
My first impressions when I seen Stephen Petty's results was this is fraudulent, this is concealment, this is manipulation.
Instead of sharing Petty's results, class action attorneys enlisted a local toxicologist to film a video that was played for residents.
The levels that people were exposed to in the community were so small that we don't expect any kinds of cancers or other health effects to have resulted from those.
The multiple people saying there's nothing to see here, but there are no issues, are just flat out either lying or wrong.
Arch Carson told everyone that he would expect no cancers as a result of this exposure. No cancers. And there are cancers developing almost every week in East Palestine, and someone dying of cancer almost every month.
These residents are among nearly 90 others fighting in court to rescind their participation in the settlement, alleging substantial evidence of fraud and misrepresentation by class counsel, who concealed critical expert findings about health risks while inducing class members to sign
This is crazy. This is some crazy stuff. And I also think it's all, when we hear stories like this, it's important to highlight them, because if you don't highlight them, it gives credence to conspiracy theorists who want to paint like a very broad brush about how like the government is always hiding all kinds of science from you and therefore is like always poisoning you in all ways, because there is clearly something untoward going on at some level of this. And it, I would say, is a conspiracy. It seems to rise to that particular level. But that doesn't give credence to all types of conspiracies. But this whole thing is crazy.
Personal injury releases in exchange for inadequate personal injury payments. Their motion was denied. They just filed an appeal alleging that class counsel's own expert, Stephen Petty, held opinions materially adverse to the settlement that were not disclosed before opt-in.
And they knew darn well.
I was duped. I played into their dog and pony show.
I believe I was manipulated. I believe there was fraud. And I have a future, and my future is going to rely on proving the bad actors that they were wrong.
Now, we have reached out to members of the class council as well as Dr. Chip Carson, and none of them have responded. Elizabeth?
Wow. Incredible reporting, Rich. Thank you. Live from East Palestine, Ohio tonight.
Thank you for watching.
Yeah, that is something else. And I mean, it's just the kind of thing where they tell you to not believe your eyes. Like they go, oh, burning all of this vinyl chloride and this big plume of incredibly dark smoke and this huge fiery biblical pillar and all of your burning eyes and like burning lungs and like weird skin rashes as the result. You're just imagining all of that. You're imagining that's bad. You're not a scientist like me. And it's just like, yeah, when you do stuff like that, and then it comes out that this is going on, you do stoke a conspiratorial mindset in society in a way that you can't just hand wave because, you're doing it. And a lot of times it's done and people justify doing it on their end because like, well, that's just the way things work. And so they don't necessarily understand that it's not something that they can just put artificial boundaries on, where it's like, yeah, maybe corporations get up to a little conspiracy with the government sometimes, but that doesn't mean you can't trust us when we tell you you can trust us. But it actually does, and that's why we're having such a issue with like conspiracy, such an issue with people no longer having faith in our institutions, because at their core, people are correct to not trust those institutions. And our the stewards of those institutions, our politicians and our critical media, just don't want to critically engage with their role in cultivating that lack of trust in the population by, doing stuff like this, essentially. Okie dokie. That was absolutely bananas. Do you want to see Candace Owens go in on Andrew Wilson again? That'll be a good, I think, palate cleanser. Because honestly, he was talking a lot of shit after that beating. In my opinion, he should have kind of just like let it go. But a lot of people can't let things go. And I mean, she told you once. Does she really have to tell you again? But I guess she does. So this is the latest Candace Owens clip. Andrew Wilson's post-loss interview is embarrassing. I think this might be the one either with Steven Crowder or the one with the TPUSA boys who replaced Charlie. I'm not too sure. I don't think it's the one where he's wearing Erica Kirk's hat and smoking cigarettes. Let's see. Oh, I keep forgetting. Doesn't matter. Candace, hit me with it. He was not beating. He was
YouTube
battered.
Premium is
I already have YouTube Premium. Stop it. He was not beaten. He was battered. Like
I have
fish.
to, I don't know, assume that you're doing it out of fear. That's the most charitable read on why you're lying in this way, is out of fear. Because if you truly do believe that Israel had something to do with Charlie's assassination, then you would probably recognize that they would have no trouble assassinating you too. All right, you guys, today on the Beavis and Butthead show, so fitting for Andrew Colvett and Blake Neff. They were joined by Andrew Wilson. That is not their horse. I know what you're thinking. It really seems like Turning Point USA has something to do with this guy. Nope, they made it very clear they don't. He just went in there and came out and suddenly really wanted to go hard at Candace Owens. Anyway, it starts, obviously, the conversation with just an exceptional coping session. What I love about Andrew Colvett, just saying something nice about him, is he is completely unaware of himself in a way that is, I don't know, you have to envy it. He's so unaware of himself. He thinks that he can just say words, and he's also a very bad liar. He's going to establish all of that in this conversation. He can't remember things that he said last week. Obviously, he doesn't have a timeline. He should have a timeline because then he wouldn't make these sorts of mistakes. But let's just start with Andrew's cope of him basically trying to suggest that I won the argument, but not really, because it's going to age in the future, and then I'm going to lose the argument maybe. This is what he had to say.
Oh, man.
I predicted that this debate, that you were going to win it because the truth is on your side, right? And as somebody who's lived this firsthand, I know all the garbage when they continually drone on about this stuff, and how many lies are continually laced in and just repeated ad nauseum so that the internet begins to believe them. So I knew that, but I knew also that she has a bigger following, bigger followers on YouTube, whatever. So I knew that immediately there was going to be this rush to say who won, who won. But I predicted this. I said, this will age really well, because what I was watching is that she conceded the whole debate very early on, multiple times at every different point and juncture. She kept conceding the point, walking things back. And that as the commentariat kind of comes in, that has, an IQ above room temperature, and pointed that out for people, that it was going to then be this kind of finishing effect after the debate. Is that what you have seen?
Notice that he didn't give any examples there, but it's always good to insult all of your detractors like that. I mean, yeah, like how can you say that I lost the debate? I've already drawn myself as the square-jawed Chad and you as the simpering virgin.
Going to then be this kind of finishing effect after the debate. Is that what you have seen?
Andrew, it is not wine. Okay, debates don't age. You don't keep them in a cellar on a consistent temperature and tell people to open it up in a few years and it'll sound better. He just lost. And that's okay, by the way. That is actually totally fine. That happens sometimes. It could happen to me in the future. And what's really funny about hearing this sort of a cope is that, as you guys know, Charlie trained me in debating. And one of the things that he always said was, if you lose a debate, own it. Own it. The internet will forget if you have a bad moment. They will not forget if you try to gaslight them and pretend it didn't happen. And so you're supposed to just come right out and be like, look, wasn't my best day. Definitely realized that I could have delivered this better or that better. And I actually, somebody who did this, and it the internet kind of a little bit forgot about it was when Ben Shapiro did BBC and he got completely crushed in a debate.
When Ben Shapiro got completely crushed by BBC. Oh, I remember that one when he went in and debated that right wing guy who he assumed was actually like a left winger because like the right wing in, the UK still believes in a few facts, right? They're not anti-vaxxer. They're not like, oh, vaccines cause autism or stuff like that, which to the American right wing, the American modern right wing is essentially like being a woke leftist now. Andrew Neil
kind of a little bit forgot about it was when Ben Shapiro did BBC and he got completely crushed in a debate, kind of got bratty and said, I'm famous or something, and wanted to end the conversation. He did end the conversation, so he sort of stormed off and it went completely viral. But he went onto his platform and he said, yep, I own that. I was not prepared. Here's what I did wrong. And that is so much more preferable to audiences because they're not being gaslit. It's like, obviously he was terrible. Just own it. And people will forgive and forget, but obviously they are not carrying on the torch for Charlie whatsoever. Anyway, I want you to hear how Andrew Wilson responded.
Oh, 100%. So essentially what happened here was really interesting. The Baron Colemans of the world and the sort of law tube picked all.
Okay, so I didn't comment on this last time, but can we just talk about why he has a graphic art depiction of Bruce Campbell with the proportions of Charlie Kirk's face as his own? Right? Like, does that not seem weird? It's like a Kirkified Bruce Campbell painting in the background. That's not what Bruce Campbell looks like. That's not what Bruce Campbell's face looks like.
Baron Colemans of the world and 100%. So essentially what happened here was really interesting. The Baron Colemans of the world and the sort of law tube picked all of this up and just started tearing her position to pieces immediately. And the commentators in the debate sphere they're making a mockery of her. They think that she's a lunatic, has no idea what she's talking about. And then on the flip side to that, too, you even have Main Street coverage. And even on the Main Street coverage, it's the same thing. They're like, well, where's any of the evidence for any of these supposed claims? And we never got to any. So not only will it age well, but what I thought that it would do more than anything else, to be as candid as possible, I thought that it would up the pressure of people questioning the questioners. And I've seen a lot of that now moving on social media of people saying, hey, wait a second, where is the actual evidence? I got hundreds of DMs, for instance, from people who didn't know that the steakhouse receipt was a complete phony fraud, that the whole thing is a fraud.
Well, can
they
I
had
just
no
say
idea
something?
that was the case.
Can I just say something? So we
Sure.
have Andrea Burkhart.
That was fucking epic, bro. The debate sphere, the law tubers all think I won. Is YouTube really that confusing now? That sounded like all the loser nerds thought that I won that loser nerd contest for sure, brother. Oh, that was epic, Cope. Gosh. And also, I still want to contend that I think a lot of those people are just saying that at this moment, Candace was saying something that's not true. You don't get points for in a debate getting steamrolled and beat and then later having everybody else go like, oh, but this thing that she's saying is not true, but because you didn't hold her to at the moment. That's the whole point of these things, right? Candace says a bunch of untrue things all the time on her show. If it was just a vehicle for her to say untrue things to that then later be dismissed, people could already do that. Like I said, if you wanted to dismiss them in the moment, you had to do it live. If not, you could have just done one of those like takedown videos people do. People do like whole takedown videos about like people like Candace all the time. We do that too, right? Like, so I just dispute that constitutes winning a debate, right? Because you didn't win. The viewers are just like poring over what she said.
She's going to join us on the show tomorrow. She is apolitical as it comes. Like, she is not like on a side at all. And I asked her, I said, if they had exculpatory evidence, whether it's the parents that actually, think he's innocent, or they have some steakhouse receipt, would they not present that at the preliminary hearing? And she was like,
all the Dark Souls challenge runners think I won that debate. All the people all the people who make like those aquariums full of exotic fish, they think I won that debate.
See, would they not present that at the preliminary hearing? And she was like, absolutely they would.
No duh.
No lawyer, if they have exculpatory evidence that proves the timeline's wrong, that proves the parents don't actually think it.
He should have said that.
Would not
He
use
should have
that
said that.
evidence because those lawyers are then basically binding their client over for 3 years in prison for something that he didn't actually do. They absolutely would have presented that evidence at preliminary hearing, okay?
Getting started is easy.
Why did it not take? God damn it. But yeah, I said the same. But yeah, I said the same thing. He should have said that. He should have said that in the moment. And even I was questioning why he would not say that in the moment. Like why he would not. No, go back to the thing. Why he wouldn't say that in the moment. But he didn't. He dropped the ball. Like he really dropped the ball. Like even if you agree that Candace was wrong, you can't say that he actively disputed it in the moment in any way that you could deem reasonably satisfactory.
Is that I think Charlie and Candace were friends back in 2018, part of 2019. That did not end well at all, actually.
So weird, because if it didn't end well at all, it's a question because why were Charlie and Erica at my wedding at the end of this? I guess I'm going to basically say to them what I said.
So I went too far. Gosh, she is like, she's so enjoying this. This was easy money. And then they're just like, they're defending themselves in the most embarrassing way possible. Like this is in no way compelling in their defense.
Preliminary hearing, okay?
I still do not understand why they keep trying to imagine that this Penguin Steakhouse Cowboy Steakhouse thing is fake and is a fraud. It's just not. I don't know how many times I can say this. I guess I'm going to basically say to them what I said to Andrew face to face is, you can keep saying this. You're going to eventually embarrass yourself. As I said, they got in touch with the FBI. The FBI is aware of this. The FBI took a statement from the owner. I spoke to who is doing the fraud, I guess, is the question. Who's doing the fraud? Is the fraud in the room with us right now, guys? Like, I know that this completely blows up everything. And that's why you guys are trying to convince the public that this didn't happen. But I spoke to the owner. The server has given an interview. There is a receipt. If you're trying to wonder why they didn't present this exculpatory evidence, maybe you should try paying attention to the hearings, because back during the one in April, they kept saying that they did not get granted discovery, that they had so many things that they needed to go through, and that they wanted to take that time to, the reason why they were asking for an extension on that preliminary hearing was because they had so many things to go through and they were not receiving their discovery requests, which could have potentially included exculpatory evidence. This was found, this Panguitch thing was actually found by podcasters who were investigating, stumbled upon this. And like I said, the FBI was contacted. There is a report made. It happened. I'm so sorry, you guys, but it happened. Now, is it possible if they weren't being absurd, they would just say, okay, yeah, I hear you. But Candace, is it possible that the server just misidentified him? And then I'd say, yeah. Of course, there's always a possibility that people truly believe that they see someone a la Mitch Snow. When we did the Fort Huachuca thing, we can verify that this person was at the restaurant. We can verify that they called the FBI. We can verify that the owner pulled the receipt. We can verify what the person ate, that there is a receipt and that it was paid for on a debit card. Asking me to go to the Visa merchant is absurd and insane. But it happened. I don't know what else to say to you. Like, okay, we're just going to keep following that. But that receipt is going to become critical, and it could, in fact, prove to be exculpatory. So stay tuned. The next bit of what takes place on this show is
One second, Candace. I got to get to the super chats. Jake Dries, thank you for the $4.99 super chat. We justified the existence of Cancer Alley in Louisiana with people living next to petrochemical plants and refineries 24/7, 365. This isn't bad by comparison. Oh, I mean, there are plenty of I forget what the exact term for it is, but like hot spots where cancer or other diseases caused by exposure to toxic chemicals are the result of emissions from factories, like spills into the water, and we don't do anything about it really. Cancer alleys, I think there are more than just the one in Louisiana. Obviously, the Aaron Brockovich one comes to mind, I think most readily to most people, but it's just a known reality that a lot of our corporations poison the citizenry in ways that the government allows, and because they've been lobbied to allow it. And we have entire conspiracy communities that exist to try to convince people that they're being poisoned by corporations in other ways to distract from like the way they're actually being poisoned. That's why you have people who think that like, oh no, we're being poisoned by seed oils and not by like things like this, not by corporations burning polyvinyl chloride, or you're being poisoned by chemtrails and not from like the emissions of this particular factory, because those are not real problems. Those are like fake problems that can, attract people to them because they touch on real problems. They gesture to real problems, but they have a few things over real problems. They seem a little bit more attractive. They make you feel like more in control or less in control sometimes, when in reality, like what's actually happening is oftentimes happening right in front of your face. Like they're burning a big train full of polyvinyl chloride and then they're telling you like it's fine, right? It's just totally fine. It can be both. It can definitely be both too. It's multi-layered. El et al. Thank you for the membership over on YouTube.
Like a whole fake bit of transparency where essentially Andrew Colvett pretends that he's going to allow Andrew Wilson to ask them anything. All right, you guys, do you feel like growing, it can feel impossible?
No, I don't talk about debt, Candace. I have a lot of issues. I think I'll just drink instead. I'm almost tempted to watch their interview together, but it's probably really embarrassing. I'd rather just watch Candace make fun of it.
The way that they're behaving, some of the evidence that I've presented on the show, some of the videos that I have presented, asking him about potentially other players. No, all this means is please give me an opportunity to trash Candace. And he does this amazing thing. Andrew Colvett, right out the gate, tries to smear me as a Hitler lover. And it's so offensively dishonest that it's even too much for Andrew Wilson. He actually fact checks. First, you got Blake, you're going to see him laugh. She loves Hitler.
Do you think that she's going to clarify what she said about Hitler? Because I remember what she said about Hitler. You may not remember, but I think she'll just like she'll just deny that she's a Hitler lover, but won't actually remind you what she said.
Fact checks. First, you got Blake, you're going to see him laugh. She loves Hitler. And then just watch Blake's face transform as he realizes that Andrew Wilson's not going to let them get away with that. And he's like, I feel like you're kind of taking that way out of context. Take a listen. It's brilliant.
Then she had that event where she basically said Hitler was great if he just would have stayed, in
Blake.
Germany.
Stayed in Germany,
which, there's a lot of problems.
Now, to be fair and charitable here, right? Just to be as unbiased as possible. I did go back and review that clip, as that seemed like it was the turning point for Turning Point, was that actual clip.
Sure.
It seemed to me that she wasn't actually trying to make any sort of like apologetics for Hitler, but rather she was trying to make a comparison to nationalism and saying that as a nationalist, she thought he did a good job. And then, she basically just kind of misspoke and buried herself with that particular lead. But obviously it became a massive PR nightmare for Turning Point, right? That's how that ended up playing out.
Well, I think it's one of those statements where you can defend it and then, in isolation, and then events afterwards, I think, lend greater.
I don't really understand what the defense actually was. Maybe he's just really that bad at arguing, but what was the defense of it? Like that he wasn't a good nationalist? Or I'm confused as to how this is better, because the statement itself is, if Hitler just wanted to make Germany great and have things run well, okay, fine. The problem is that he had dreams outside of Germany. He wanted to globalize. He wanted everybody to be German. So I mean, I guess she didn't say like the was good, but that is saying good things about Hitler. But what is his defense? I don't really get this.
Rather, she was trying to to me that she wasn't actually trying to make any sort of like apologetics for Hitler, but rather she was trying to make a comparison to nationalism and saying that as a nationalist, she thought he did a good job. And then, she basically just kind of misspoke and buried herself with that particular lead. But obviously it became a massive PR nightmare for Turning Point, right? That's how that ended up playing.
We need to listen to the question. Okay, what was the question? I don't mind looking. I mean, I can't think of a question that would make it okay, but like, sure, we could totally look at the question. What question was she asked? Nah, I'm Googling it. Because I don't want to portray Candace out of context. I'm going to grok it. No, I would never. I don't want to get sexualized. I'm going to Google it like normal. Although Google will definitely give me like the AI results at the top. I don't know how to turn that off and have it actually take. We're not going to change clips. I'll just read it. Because, hey, she could have been asked like a really leading question, like, what's your favorite thing about Hitler? You're not allowed to say anything negative. Let's see. Okay, the Newsweek article about it. So this is from February 8th, 2019. Okay. It was in London in December. Owens was asked by an audience member about nationalism in Western politics, where she brought up Hitler. I actually don't have any problems at all with the word nationalism, Owens said during the Q&A. I think that the definition gets poisoned by elitists that actually want globalism. Okay, globalism is what I don't want. Whenever we say nationalism, the first thing people think about, at least in America, is Hitler. Owens then goes on to say that it's okay if Hitler just wanted to make Germany great and have things run well, adding that it would be problematic if he had dreams outside of Germany. The political commentator said that Hitler wanted to globalize and said she doesn't really have an issue with nationalism. He was a national socialist, but if Hitler just wanted to make Germany great and have things run well, okay, fine. The problem is that he had dreams outside of Germany. He wanted to globalize, she continued. He wanted everybody to be German, everybody to be speaking German, everybody to look a different way. To me, that's not nationalism. In thinking about how we could go bad down the line, I don't really have an issue with nationalism. I really don't. I don't understand like how that makes it better. I just don't necessarily get it, because like the argument is that she's not saying that Hitler is good. She's saying that like nationalism shouldn't be like concerned with policing places outside of your own borders. But Hitler would have been bad if he only killed all the Jews in Germany too, right? Obviously, she doesn't mention any of the Jews in that statement. I'm just saying, like, if Hitler only killed all of the Jews in Germany and all of the Roma in Germany and all of the trans and LGBTQ people and like communist union organizers in Germany, that would have still been bad. It's not just because he also expanded to take over other parts of Europe. I mean,
Well, I think it's one of those statements where you can defend it and then, in isolation.
Can you defend it?
And then events afterwards, I think, lend greater clarity to it.
Yeah, it was part of a whole.
Yeah, like the defense you could make is, she just meant, he wanted Germany's economy to grow. He wanted to undo Versailles. She didn't mean the weird, kill all the Jews. Except then, 2023, 2024, she actually becomes obsessed with the Jews.
I mean, it's hard to extricate Hitler from the kill all the Jews part. And I know he killed other people, but like some people would say trying to extricate Hitler from the kill all the Jews part is running interference for Hitler, right? Like, I don't think that they really fully get that that's what people have a concern with. Like, they don't not understand that she didn't mention the Jews in that particular quote. They just think that like when you go like, oh, but he had the trains running on time, that's running interference for Hitler, right? Because like, You know, if you were to, for example, get pizza from a restaurant that is child trafficking, you wouldn't be extolling the virtues of the pepperoni because people would think, well, you're making excuses for the child trafficking, right? I'm just putting it into the parlance of these types of people. And so it is running interference for Hitler.
2023, 2024, she actually becomes obsessed with the Jews all the time.
Yeah, I would say it was part of a whole, though.
In
to
the
your
French.
point. Yeah, you could, if that was a one-off, you probably could have defended it. But then we had a bunch of chapters that were really up in arms about it. And then you had this, I think it was the Christchurch shooter in New Zealand that like said she was, this guy was inspired by Candace. It was like a whole bunch of stuff.
Just absolutely mortifying that Andrew Wilson actually watched the clip. We weren't talking about Jews at all, and we were talking about the topic of nationalism. And I was asked a question specifically, like, Candace, when you say that you're a nationalist, some people might attribute that to Adolf Hitler. And I said, well, it's not attributable to Adolf Hitler, because Adolf Hitler, if he had just wanted to stay in Germany and make Germany great, we wouldn't have an issue with that. No one would have an issue in that. But he did.
No, what do you, I guess I'm the dumb one. I just don't see what, like, just because you don't mention the Jewish people doesn't mean it's not part of the equation. Like, are they just saying it again, right? She's just saying it again.
When you say that you're a nationalist, some people might attribute that to Adolf Hitler. And I said, well, it's not attributable to Adolf Hitler, because Adolf Hitler, if he had just wanted to stay in Germany and make Germany great, we wouldn't have an issue with that. No one would have an issue in that. But he didn't just want to do that. He had ambitions outside of Germany. That's what I said. And they took that, and Blake, it is just little sneering. We're going to try to lie, to try to make it seem as though I supported Adolf Hitler. That is why Turning Point USA is trash. They are trash for that. There was no confusion. It was just an attempt to smear me. And it was a bridge too far for Andrew Wilson, who said, okay, but like, I watched that clip and that's not what was happening. Then they obviously move on. And by the way, he says, oh, well, then later on, she gets obsessed with Jews. First off, he's talking about a gap of 2008.
I also don't want to even get into the conversation of whether or not you can have like a positive nationalism that doesn't automatically like exclude people that you don't fit into whatever very specific and sometimes unclarified version of what it means to be a member of that nation, because like a lot of people imagine there can be a positive nationalism where we just all go like, well, yeah, everyone who is an American, but when people imagine in their head what American means, a lot of times that's coded or involves a few other biases, like when, you know, they talk about what is and is not a migrant as well, right? They picture a certain type of person. And the same is true about America. And so even if we agree that we are a melting pot, people aren't always going to be fully conscious of how biased they are in their initial like assumptions about what it means to be an American. But it doesn't even matter, because she's not even trying to dispute that. She's just saying that if he did what he wanted to do in Germany, he'd be fine. But like that wouldn't be the case.
To smear me, and it was a bridge too far for Andrew Wilson, who said, okay, but like, I watched that clip and that's not what was happening. Then they obviously move on. And by the way, he says, oh, well, then later on, she gets obsessed with Jews. First off, he's talking about a gap of 2018 when I was speaking about nationalism on stage with Charlie, by the way. They're leaving that part out as well. I was with Charlie, and journalists were in the room and nobody had a problem with it at all. And then BuzzFeed pulls the clip months later. And then he fast forwards and says, oh, but, you know, in 2024, later on, there was an issue where Candace said, you know, genocide is always wrong. And that's when things are she's obsessed with not killing children in Israel. That's what he really means. So then they move on and they try to reassert this idea that Charlie and I were not friends. And this is always my favorite one, because Andrew is so accidentally stupid that he doesn't realize that he debunks himself in just like one sweeping statement. He's going to try to make fun and then he's going to debunk it. So listen to what Blake says and what Andrew says, and I'm going to then allow you to listen to what Charlie said. Take a listen.
And so I'd like to start by going all the way back, and maybe you can tell us actually what the relationship was between Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk. What actually was it?
Yeah, I'd like to go first there, even though you have far more to say, Andrew, because I can just speak from my perspective as someone who arrived late 22, moved out here in 23, that I have never met Candace Owens and don't know her.
Thank you.
Maybe I saw her in person once at a distance.
Probably
Maybe I
not.
shook her hand. I've never had a conversation with her to my knowledge. And I think that speaks to something because I was with Charlie for close to 3 years. And I feel like I met most of the people Charlie was super close with. I met.
You sound like Charlie's boyfriend when you say it that way. I don't mean to be rude, but he sounds like Charlie's boyfriend when he says it like that. I was with Charlie for 3 years. He speaks more, everyone basically speaks more, I think, emotionally about Charlie than his wife does. But I'm going to play that back so you can see what I see.
I have never met Candace Owens and don't know her.
Thank you.
Maybe I saw her in person once at a distance.
Probably
Maybe I
not.
shook her hand. I've never had a conversation with her to my knowledge. And I think that speaks to something because I was with Charlie for close to 3 years. And I feel like I met most of the people Charlie was super close with. I met donors. I met his family members. I met his team. I met a lot. And I don't know Candace. So I like to use that as a preface, but you have more that you can say about that.
Yeah, and Blake, you have that great video that everybody plays of you reacting to Candace.
Oh yeah, where I'm kind of like raising my eyebrow.
Yeah,
a little.
It's fair to say Blake was early on the being suspicious train. Yeah, if you go back far enough, I mean, that's why. I mean, I put out that tweet basically saying, Candace,
early for
your
the sus
central
train.
foundational lie is that you and Charlie were friends. You were not friends, right?
They were definitely friends.
Recent, the end of Charlie's.
They were definitely friends. Oh my God. Like, this is the worst track to take against her. They have so much correspondence. They were clearly friends. Pretty good friends. They love talking about Nicki Minaj together. Like, they were twerking together. They were clearly friends. I don't know why they feel the need to act this way.
You were not friends, right? Show me something
high
from
school.
recent, the end of Charlie's life, the last 12 months or whatever. And I think she and then I said 18 months, 24 months. I think she showed something at 22 months, and so I got community noted, right? Okay, whatever. What I can tell you is that I think Charlie and Candace were friends back in 2018, part of 2019. That did not end well at all, actually.
So weird, because if it didn't end well at all, it's a question because why were Charlie and Erica at my wedding at the end of 2019? And what's funny is he mentions this clip of Blake at the beginning of it. But that clip that he's referring to is Charlie discussing our friendship in November of 2023. So he's trying to say we haven't been friends since 2018, but he references.
Well, I mean, your friendship definitely didn't end well. I think we can all agree that. But,
November of 2023. So he's trying to say we haven't been friends since 2018, but he references this clip of Charlie and Blake looking unhappy about it because Blake didn't know Charlie. Blake didn't know who Charlie's friends were. As he admits, he's like, I didn't meet Candace because I got married and had children and lived on the other side of the country. That's just how it works. My best friends I see about once or twice a year because we've moved, friends that live in Florida, people that live in Connecticut. That's just the way.
This is honestly all so strange. The way they talk about Charlie, you would think Charlie was like an apollicule with all of these people. Like the way that they talk about how you would have met your friends, other friends, and we've never seen each other together. Like it all sounds like they were dating Charlie. And I'm not a Candace Charlie lovers truther, but the way they talk about him, they have to overemphasize their relationship with him so that they can take his power. They can try to adopt all of the power that he had with his fans, all of the rapport he has with his fans. And so they have to really, really emphasize just how close they all were. But when they do that, it does make them all sound like they were dating Charlie. Like everyone involved in this particular situation sounds like they were part of a polycule with Charlie, except for Erica.
Because we've moved, friends that live in Florida, people that live in Connecticut. That's just the way life works when you get married and start having kids. The donors are not his friends, Blake. I know you guys love money, but when he says, I've met his friends, I know the donors, you're just a work colleague. So you see him every day at work. You don't know Charlie. You guys are not his friends. And this clip is what he is referring to as he then moves on and says that we weren't friends since 2018. He keeps going backwards. It's like he keeps going a year back. Listen to Charlie in his own words in November of 2023.
I mean, Candace is, she's on our team. She's the best, right? I mean, we're on Team Candace, and I'm also, I'm on Team Freedom Center too. But I got a text message from some lunatic. Charlie, why do you have her still speaking at AmFest? I said, lose my number. Wow. I said, you obviously haven't been through the Tyler remembers the Charlie Candace thing.
Yeah, like they were really close. It does not make sense to attack her for not being friends with Charlie. They were clearly very close. If anything, you have to attack her for literally abusing his memory in order to make content, like really, really disrespectful content that is ultimately going to hurt the people he also loved, right? But that wouldn't work. I'm just saying.
Remembers the Charlie Candace thing.
That background's crazy, though.
Everyone thought you were married. They thought you were married. Remember, Charlie? They were like, "Are they?"
See,
married?
yeah.
Oh, it was.
Charlie was getting around.
That one got me. Very unsubstantiated internet rumor.
Yeah, that's not true, but
it's not true. Okay,
I'm remembering some choice memes that I definitely don't have saved on my backup hard drives.
I disagree with Jack. Can I take a moment to thought crime Jack right now? I disagree with Jack. She's not higher than him on the graphic because her name's shorter. She's higher than him on the graphic because he's a white male.
Wow. Racism at Turning Point
we have
confirmed.
To.
You know what? Maybe Tyler is all right.
Blake did that. Blake was the one.
Tyler is all right after all.
So they want you to think that Charlie just is lying there. He's reminiscing and he's lying, and that actually we're Team Candace. Lose my number, he says to someone who wasn't his friend. I mean, it's just such an absurdity that they have to do this. And I have presented evidence every year from 2018. They keep sticking to the 2018 timeline because after Charlie passed, I showed people text messages of Charlie predicting his own death in 2018, because that is relevant, that in 2018, Charlie foresaw that he was going to die young and that I was going to carry on the torch.
8 years later.
Be my David. I don't think I'm going to live this thing through. When I signed on a dotted line with Turning Point USA, from the moment that I signed on a line with Turning Point USA, he started having visions of his own death. That is the reason that they started this ridiculous narrative that I didn't speak to Charlie since 2018. It's such a nonsense, and it's so easily debunked. We've debunked it so many times on this show, and yet they still are trying to push it because they have nothing left. They cannot respond to anything, and they are trying to rewrite Charlie's history. Charlie and I were very close. We were like brother and sister. And yes, we spent so much time together when we were obviously both single. And once you become a parent and get married, your relationship has to change. Your priority, and also you have to have respect for his wife, which I did. He was married, and he has to respect for my husband. George became close to Charlie. The whole year of our engagement, we traveled around with Charlie, and we have so many memories. He has so many messages with Charlie. And so I don't know, it just makes.
Yeah, George, her husband, was very high up in Turning Point UK, which I think is how they met even. So, I mean, I would believe that he was also very close with Charlie, and he's mentioned that in the past too.
Makes me laugh if they think that they could do this. It's just not going to be possible. We just spent such great time together. And whenever we think about it, you see it on me as well. I just reflect on it with just so much happiness. And I'm happy that I've gotten back to that, where that anger that I felt and the grief that I felt is now moving into acceptance, like I keep telling you, where I'm able to just revisit everything and just be so grateful for the time that I had with Charlie and how staunchly we always defended each other whenever we were going through anything. And then, of course, in the very next breath, which I'm not going to show you, he then says, oh, he totally had her back when she got fired from the Daily Wire. Yeah, Andrew, that's now your timeline is pushed up to 2024. I was fired in March of 2024. So how long are you trying to say that we weren't friends for? It's just such a nonsense. Truly, let it go. Blake, nobody knows who you are. Neither did Charlie. Okay, you started working for him in 2023. You're not laughing because you don't know anything. Tyler's laughing because he does. And it is, like I said, it was like a coming of age together, and a real relationship was forged. And you just don't have the power to wipe that away. I'm sorry, Andrew. You can't even put your timeline together. Get a timeline. My timeline is so good. Anyway, this part was the most incredible to me, of like when he asks him, doesn't say positive evidence, but he asks him for an example of, why I left Turning Point USA. And he says I was difficult to work with. And here's what Andrew Colvett explains happened one time.
Could you give more details there? Even I would like to hear that. Like, what caused her to depart, if we can say?
Well, I mean, there's two things really, and part of it is you got to give credit where it's due. She was a rising star. She was growing really fast. You know, Charlie famously sort of offered her a job. What did you? Sorry if I missed something that you said, Andrew. Oh, okay.
Oh, you're
She's
good.
a liar.
Yeah. So she was, you know, Charlie offered her a job. Basically, right on meeting her, kind of saw that she was somebody that could help Turning Point, help the movement, in his opinion. And then they, you know, she explodes onto the scene. You know, Kanye had that tweet where it's like, "I like the way Candace Owens thinks," and it was kind of like a rocket ship, right? And then they had, but she became more and more difficult to work with, more and more issues with the team. And then she had that moment
when you say difficult to work with, what do you mean?
I think, you know, she was very aware of her rising star power. And so she started exerting more demands on timing, on where she could be deployed, what schools.
So she was becoming like a prima donna?
You could use that word.
That's what I've heard. I've definitely heard complaints from people who have worked with her.
Yeah, and that continued on after when we started working with her later on. Just, you know, I think she canceled an event with us, and our event team still tells this story, you know, like the day before, and we had to scramble to get it replaced because she ended up in like France with Kanye or something the next day.
Yeah, no, she got too big for them. Like, they're the genesis to her Phil Collins. It's okay. It's okay. She got too big for them, and they didn't know their place, and then she left. It really just is the way it is, right? This is the dog eat dog world of content creation. She got too big for them. Like, yeah, of course, she wasn't at whatever stupid school you guys wanted to deploy her at. She was in France with Kanye West, bro. Just be happy for the clout.
I just want to address that because, again, he's such a slime ball. That is the only time that I canceled an event with Turning Point USA. So he's telling the truth. By the way, that's 2022, late 2022. I thought.
No offense. It doesn't matter, Candace. It doesn't matter. Look at where you are and look at where they are. Look at where you are and look at where they are. Like, you were right to cancel that event. You were right to not go. Like, you don't need to make excuses for it. Like, they suck. Look at them. Look at them. You were right not to go. You made the right decision objectively. They can complain about it, but yeah, it just is what it is. Nah, we don't need to watch the rest of this. That was crazy. Good stuff, though. Really funny. I feel like the Copacabana is going to be well attended for the next few weeks with all of the various people having these kinds of weird meltdowns. She's right, though. You should just not talk about it. You should just own your loss and then, like, continue to move on. Make good content. Like, it's at the end of the day, just one bad episode. Everyone has one bad episode. Everyone has a lot of bad episodes if you're lucky, you know. And so you got to just know how to move on. If you can't move on, if you let your ego get bruised like that, although it's really easy to understand why you would, then, of course, people aren't going to be able to move on either because you're not moving on. Do you think his wife is bothering him at home about it? I don't want to know. I'm just asking. Are we doing any esoteric stuff today? Oh, that's a good question. Well, first, I promised that we would cover some of the weather issues that are going on around the world. We might as well start with Indiana. And I say might as well, as though it's not an important story, but we should start with Indiana because I promised. So let's just maybe find a more recent story about the power outage. I don't have one in front of me, but there are plenty coming out of the local Chicago ABC 7 affiliate, and apparently there's a class action lawsuit being filed by residents who are being impacted by the power outage against NIPSCO, which I assume is the name of the utilities company.
No storms hitting as tens of thousands of people in Northwest Indiana are going on a week and a half without power. Now,
sorry. This is from 11 hours ago. Like I said, this is a local Chicago ABC affiliate, so.
Indiana Governor Mike Braun asking the federal government to issue a major disaster declaration to help with relief efforts across the state.
And that request estimates property damage between $550 million and more than $5 billion. Indiana's congressional delegation urging President Trump to support the declaration. In the meantime, people living in Northwest Indiana are now suing NIPSCO over the slow progress in getting the power back on to thousands.
Now, take a look. You can see the situation is still dire with severe outages in Lake and Porter counties. We have team coverage starting with ABC 7's Gabe Ferris in Portage tonight.
Some of the homes on this block in Portage have their power back on tonight, but for so many here, the cleanup is just beginning. The debris on this road is piled feet high. Tonight, the cleanup continues after that devastating storm ripped through northwest Indiana 10 days ago.
This was a system or stem system failure on this tree with an uprooting situation.
Bruce Thibodeau organizing the removal of this 40,000-pound tree in Gary. His company agreeing to bill the insurance company directly after the homeowners were first told they'd have to foot the bill.
If you've got insurance, it should absolutely be your insurance responsibility to cover it. They shouldn't be paying out of their pockets.
And today, a group of NIPSCO customers filing a class action lawsuit in Porter County, alleging the company failed to remove hazardous trees and vegetation before the storm.
So much damage was done, so many consumers were harmed, but it doesn't mean that the lawsuit is going to succeed.
ABC 7 chief legal analyst Gil Sofer saying the defendants have an uphill battle.
Where were the trees in question? Were they within the zone for which the utility is responsible? Were they on private property? Were they outside of those areas? Each of those.
Yeah, what you haven't considered is that the state might have developed regulations to essentially immunize these utility companies from having any responsibility. That's the main thing here. It's like, has the state decided to basically immunize these utility companies from having the responsibility to maintain clear area around the power lines or not? Have they abdicated responsibility to the private consumer or not? Like, that's really the question.
Responsible? Were they on private property? Were they outside of those areas? Each of those questions will have to be answered one by one.
Late today, NIPSCO responding to the lawsuit with a written statement calling the damage unprecedented. NIPSCO's vegetation management spend has more than doubled since 2016, the company wrote, demonstrating our commitment and focus on maintaining a safe and reliable electric system.
Unless we underground the entire system, it's very difficult to prevent.
Tonight, about 40,000 NIPSCO customers remain without power, and for tens of thousands more here in Indiana, it will take months to rebuild.
We're looking at probably next spring. By the time all of the cleanup is completed, the repairs are getting mostly done, the roofs are back in place.
And no word tonight on just how quickly the federal government could declare a disaster here. Residents in northwest Indiana telling me all week that federal help cannot come soon enough. Gabe Ferris, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
All right. And we've had questions about the amount of federal help they're going to be able to get under the Mark Wayne Mullen headed DHS. So we'll definitely have to keep up with this story, because I have to imagine that a lot of the mismanagement that was happening under Kristi Noem is not going to be solved by having Mark Wayne Mullen be the head now, but this, it's just like a shuffling of the deck chairs on the Titanic, essentially, at the Trump administration. Put a man in charge, and maybe people won't notice how incompetent he is, but people are definitely going to notice how incompetent he is when they're waiting for support from the federal government for like disaster relief.
Thank you. And as we have been reporting, it has been problem after problem for people struggling with these outages.
ABC 7's Trey Ward in studio tonight with a look at what many people in Gary are now going through. Trey?
Robin and Judy, while thousands of people remain in the dark in northwest Indiana, some in one Gary community are dealing with another layer of issues, all due to these power outages. Now, people living in the Woods Park subdivision of Gary say they just got a new sewer system installed, but it needs power to work. It's causing pipes to back up and flood some yards. Portable bathrooms and showers have been set up as the city works to get things back online, but some residents say those efforts aren't enough.
For myself, I'm an amputee, and like we say, we appreciate the porta potties and everything they have, but as far as being handicapped, I cannot get into it because they're not handicap accessible.
Meantime, other people in Gary are resorting to living outside in tents as they wait for their power to be restored.
I have an ICDC, a defibrillator implant. I call 911. They say either go to the hospital. Hospital is only taking emergency. No power, no heart machine works.
Do you feel forgotten about?
Yeah, very much so. It all depends on, big ones, little ones.
And Gary's blackout continues to draw attention on social media too. Internet star and food critic Keith Lee says he plans to travel to Gary on Monday to help the Salvation Army and the city pass out food.
Wait, why are they outside? Because their houses have been destroyed by like all of the flooding and the various impacts of the weather, whether it's the roof or the house just being like damaged with water. You know, you can't just like stay in a domicile that has been totally soaked because there can be a lot of mold issues. It can just be condemned. They just probably can't stay inside for one reason or another. It's probably just literally not safe. It's safer to be outside. Well, that is until the government decides that technically, even though you can't go back home, well, I guess not technically, you are homeless because you can't go into your home, that like these tent cities are detracting from property value and they decide to like sick Gavin Newsom on you. But I mean, it's all so heartbreaking.
And supplies. Rob.
Trey, when we're not on the air, you can find updates on the power crisis on our website and news app. You can also follow the repair progress in real time with the ABC 7 Power Outage Tracker.
Yeah. I mean, and of course, I got distracted by this guy's hat. I'm sure you also got distracted by this guy's hat. I don't need to talk to you about like the whole situation. Yeah. The maroon fedora. The hat speaks for itself. I mean, yeah, I'm not going to even talk about the hat. He's the lawyer representing the, I assume, people who have been inconvenienced by this. Now, see here. Oh, you know what? This is actually a good story to cover too, because it's not to do with the weather. It is to do with the United States, but it fits more into the topic of the government kind of poisoning everybody. So the U.S. Forest Service and timber companies have been spraying a record amount of glyphosate because if you'll recall, the Trump administration has made it, I guess, mandatory, but no, they've relieved people of the burden of regulations in some areas as it pertains to glyphosate. And you'll remember that glyphosate was the Roundup ingredient that led to the huge settlement against Monsanto and Bayer years ago. Like, I think one of the largest settlements because of it being a carcinogen. So yeah, let's just turn over to this particular story.
The Trump administration this week proposed to open nearly 45 million acres of national forest land to roads and logging, part of its broader push to boost timber production. The announcement comes as a year-long investigation reveals how California forests are already being managed to grow more timber using a controversial herbicide being sprayed at record levels by timber companies and the U.S. Forest Service. The Center for Investigative Reporting's Nate Halverson has that story.
Every year, Joe Van Meter welcomes thousands of tourists into the Lassen National Forest in California, where he and his wife run the Mill Creek Resort.
Yeah, thank you guys. Have a great day.
They moved here in 2017 to escape the city and raise a family in what they call a slice of heaven.
Yeah, it's a beautiful piece of property. We have about 12 acres here.
But since purchasing the nearly 100-year-old resort, Van Meter told us he's had to evacuate guests and staff twice to escape massive forest fires.
And how close from right here did the fires get? Right there, really to the edge of our property. It's a devastating thing to live through, and it's traumatic.
And destructive. So when Van Meter learned the U.S. Forest Service planned to replant trees in the burned out areas around his home, he was thrilled. Then he heard the agency's plans involved glyphosate.
My initial reaction was what is that?
He quickly discovered glyphosate is the key ingredient in Roundup, which has been at the center of lawsuits resulting in more than $12 billion in monetary judgments and settlements to thousands of people who claimed it made them sick. The World Health Organization's cancer agency has made it clear. It thinks glyphosate is a health risk. Back in 2015, it determined the herbicide was, quote, probably carcinogenic to humans. Last month, Bayer, which bought glyphosate manufacturer Monsanto in 2018, created a new company called Ruvian to focus solely on its glyphosate-based business. In a statement to the NewsHour, Ruvian said it stands behind the safety of its glyphosate-based products, which have been tested extensively, approved by regulators, and used around the globe for 50 years.
Sure, why not?
The Forest Service considers it a valuable tool and has plans to spray glyphosate on about 10,000 acres in Lhasa National Forest near Van Meter's home. It claims it will help accelerate reforestation efforts. What was your reaction when you saw that they were planning on using herbicides across the land right around your community?
That it seems like it's poison that they're putting into the woods. There's some real health concerns for children, for babies, right? I have a 2-month-old. This is our backyard. This is where my children play.
Lhasa National Forest is hardly alone in turning to glyphosate. According to our analysis of more than 5 million pesticide reports, Roundup and glyphosate products are being sprayed in record amounts across California's forests, quadrupling in the last 2 decades. The usage is especially widespread on private timber company land, and the evidence we discovered is plain to see.
To my right, it's perfectly demarcated. You see where the herbicides have been sprayed. To my left, they haven't recently sprayed herbicides, so the bushes, the life is coming back among the pines.
To justify its continuing use of glyphosate, the Forest Service commissioned an in-depth study 15 years ago. That study examined reports from around the world and concluded that the chemical was safe for the environment and people. But our investigation found that the Forest Service's assessment relied heavily on studies that were manipulated by Monsanto to quietly shape the scientific record, according to company emails and depositions made public in litigation.
No way. The classic oil industry trick, the classic oil industry global warming trick. This is what gives rise to conspiratorial thinking too, because we just have a history of companies manipulating science. We still have a history of companies manipulating science in such a way that gives credence to conspiracy theorists, right? Both in the sense that the manipulated science promotes conspiracy theories or non-science, right, under the guise of science, or it just engenders distrust in people in the scientific community because they can point to specific examples of stuff like this, or to big tobacco, or the oil industry and global warming. Although people don't believe in global warming, I suppose.
Monsanto approximately 33 years.
Dr. William Heidens was Monsanto's toxicologist and helped orchestrate a public campaign to promote glyphosate as safe. At this deposition in 2017, he was asked to read an old email he wrote.
The focus of this is what is the carcinogenic potential of glyphosate.
Monsanto emails revealed that Heidens and others searched for outside scientists they could pay to, quote, get up and shout glyphosate is non-toxic, and write seemingly independent studies that would be, quote, referenced and used to counterbalance the negative stuff.
And you knew that it would be more powerful if it looked like it had been written by outside authors.
No, that's not correct.
Let's see what it says here. You say it was noted this would be more powerful if authored by non-Monsanto scientists.
Oh yeah, I see that. So
no, you don't understand. You literally said that. He thought he was being paraphrased, or he was inferring. No, you literally said that. A great little sequence here. Amazing. Oh yeah, I guess I did say that.
Been written by outside. And you knew that it would be more powerful if it looked like it had been written by outside authors.
No, that's not correct.
Let's see what it says here. You say it was noted this would be more powerful if authored by non-Monsanto scientists.
Oh yeah, I see that. So I sort of misunderstood your question.
In another company email, Heidens wrote that his team would, quote, ghostwrite a study, by which he meant Monsanto would do the writing and scientists would just edit and sign their names, so to speak. The same way, he added, they handled a study called Williams, Crows, and Monroe in
You're taking notes about a criminal conspiracy. Gosh, we have to get that on the soundboard too from The Wire. It happens all the time. People love self-snitching. Don't you know how to have a conversation in person?
Same way, he added, they handled a study called William.
honestly, this is what happens when people don't think they're going to be held accountable, right? Because in The Wire, the people who know that they might be held accountable, he says, you're taking notes on a fucking criminal conspiracy. This is what happens when people don't think they're going to be held accountable. They take notes on criminal conspiracies because it's just doing business to them.
Names, so to speak. The same way, he added, they handled a study called Williams, Crows, and Monroe in 2000.
Remember that last time we did this?
Which turned out to be one of the most influential pro-glyphosate reports at the time. It concluded, quote, there is no potential for Roundup herbicide to pose a health risk to humans. That study was cited 28 times in that 15-year-old Forest Service assessment on the safety of glyphosate. And the agency continues to point to it, even though the journal that originally published the paper on glyphosate retracted it last year due to, quote, serious ethical concerns and, quote, the failure to disclose the involvement of Monsanto.
Hey, how are you? Good. How are you doing? Good.
We reached out to the Forest Service and asked to learn more about their use of herbicides and met up with District Ranger Russell Nickerson.
So I'm the decision maker for the district.
He oversees the management of 500,000 acres of the Lassen National Forest, including the plan to spray glyphosate across 10,000 acres near Van Meter's home.
Why use herbicides like glyphosate?
So reforestation efforts, brush really outcompetes small trees. It grows faster, gets taller than them, and starts to shade them out.
Nickerson told us denser forests means the Forest Service will one day have more timber to sell.
And is it safe to use?
I mean, really, if you want to talk more herbicide.
What the fuck kind of answer is that? Wow. Sometimes people think I read too much into stuff. Look at this guy. Is it safe? You don't need to be a body language analysis to understand this.
And is it safe to use?
I mean, really, if you want to talk more herbicide details,
what is safe?
It's probably our
Webster
Washington
defines
office
safe.
that you would talk to on that.
We showed him that our investigation had found that 5 of the top 7 peer-reviewed studies cited in the Forest Service's 15-year-old report about glyphosate had been orchestrated by Monsanto.
So when this is what you're basing your decision off of, does that information give you pause?
Something you'd have to talk about with our national office.
We reached out to the chief of the Forest Service in Washington, D.C., but he declined our request for an interview. Meanwhile, the spraying of glyphosate continues. Some of the heaviest spraying in California has taken place near Yosemite Valley, Lassen Volcanic National Park, and the Lake Tahoe area, including here in the 75,000 acres affected by the 2021 Caldor fire.
So here I am in the Caldor fire scar. You can see that life is beginning to return. Even down here, you'll see that right next to each other, 2 baby conifers are coming back.
But it didn't take long to find where glyphosate has already been deployed.
Yes, poison
all
them.
this behind me, this has been sprayed. This is what it looks like when they've sprayed herbicides, glyphosate. It's killed all of.
That looks totally healthy. It's all like bleached white, like an elephant graveyard, right? Like it's all bleached white, like when you leave bones out in the middle of the sun and the desert, or like that one final technique Kimimaro does to like Gaara and Rock Lee when they're chasing after Sasuke. Like it looks fine. It looks totally fine.
All of the living bushes from last year.
Nearby Tahoe residents, including 3-time Olympian Hannah Teeter, says she and her neighbors were given little say on the use of glyphosate in their backyards.
There's no way we would ever approve this, especially because, like, as you can see, this is some of the cleanest water in the world. It flows all the way down to other communities who drink it.
Yeah.
And it's like
these residents told us they feel like they're being exposed to a harmful chemical, and it's being forced on them by the Forest Service.
Yeah, they're taking away the choice of being surrounded by a toxic chemical that's going to be here for years. It's going to be on the ground where we hike, where we bike, where we camp.
That's the same kind of concern that motivates Joe Van Meter. As the spraying goes on near his family home, he's determined to keep raising awareness to help his community push back.
We need work to be done, and so I want to see that work done, but I want to see it done without the use of toxic chemicals.
For the PBS NewsHour and the Center for Investigative Reporting, I'm Nate Halverson in Mill Creek, California.
Well, I mean, I don't know why they're so paranoid. I'm sure the government is right that it's fine until 8 years from now when they release a report that they did at this time that says it's not fine to you and go like, oops, well, we don't look back. Sorry about that cancer. We don't look back. At the time, we told you it was fine, but it wasn't. And, you know, everyone involved is retired or on Fox News or on CNN or in some kind of like cushy private job now. And we don't look back. Sorry about that. Have you heard of East Palestine? We don't look back. Happened already. RFK said it's completely safe. He drank a whole cup of it, right? No, that was Obama with the like post-spill water or something. He should drink a whole cup of it. That would make me really feel safe. Have these people never played or watched Resident Evil? Few have. Flint. Oh, yes. I always think it's like fracking liquid. I don't know why. Probably because of the whole like nuclear waste denial people, because they're always saying you can drink like nuclear waste and it's fine. It won't do anything to you. Or like irradiated water or whatever. Oh, yes. Okay. So I wanted to do this story out of Al Jazeera because, as you can imagine, as we talk about all the time, climate catastrophes unfairly burden the disabled, the marginalized in one way or another. But I think the most relevant tend to be people of lower socioeconomic status. And a lot of that has to do with the ability to rebuild your life, the ability to, we know that a lot of times the cheapest property is also the property most susceptible to various forms of like natural catastrophe. But sometimes it's also just being able to rebuild your life or even just escaping. And so this story came out of Al Jazeera about the new hurricane evacuation business that is taking off in Florida. Yaka shit. Thank you for the $2 super chat. The dead trees remind me of the Lorax. Soon it will be illegal in America to reference the Lorax. If you talk about the Lorax, you're going to be whipped. Deathstroke MC, thank you for the $2 super chat. They were in the board game Polycule. Is that a board game? I should get into more board games. I should get into like a gaming community in the Netherlands, like a D&D group. The new business of hurricane evacuation. How expensive do you think it's going to be to evacuate from Florida? Probably a lot.
To songs, to snacks. Modern America's got a subscription for everything. But surviving storms? That's a new one. Literally getting out when the hurricanes are coming in. Now yours for a recurring fee, of course.
Priority evac members have a different plan. They're first out.
Well, I would say you already have that, or you're supposed to have that. It's called the government. And the public sector and taxes are like that, right? It's only because we've eroded so much like of our public sector and also people's expectation of that public sector by holding up private companies that this even sort of makes sense, because we're supposed to have that already. It's the government. It's like the taxes that you pay for your government is a recurring fee.
Fee, of course.
Priority evac members have a different plan. They're first out.
One company is offering a guaranteed seat on an emergency charter flight out of Florida if a hurricane is coming. Limited to 2 hurricanes every season, $1,250 a year. Private air evacuation, once an elite luxury, now being pitched to anyone who can afford it. Hurricane season runs from the start of June all the way through to the end of November. But it is around about this point, these months, kind of halfway through, that life here in Florida can get really hairy, because this is when the big storms tend to arrive. That calm water going from this to this.
It was terrifying. It was very terrifying.
As John and Brittany know all too well.
You can see the water line on the side of the house.
Their home in St. Petersburg on the Gulf Coast was destroyed in 2024. 2 hurricanes in 2 weeks. First, Helene, which brought catastrophic flooding. They tried to ride that one out.
We have 6 pets. We have 2 kids. I mean, evacuating is a challenge for us. It's hard to find places to go.
Then when Milton formed days later, they knew it was time to go.
I said, I got to get out of here, and I got to get out of here now. And so I went to the new Airbnb and grabbed the 4 cats, and I headed north. And I didn't know where I was going to go.
The issue is that when evacuations are suggested or ordered, for so many people it just becomes impossible to get out. For example, trying to find a rental car when everybody else is doing exactly the same thing, or trying to locate petrol, gasoline, because petrol stations are busy, people are filling up their vehicles, they're filling their generators up. On top of that, flights tend to be completely booked up, or costs are through the roof. And then there is the issue of pets. There are so many factors here. In fact, more than half of Floridians say they have no evacuation plan, and 43% have less than $1,000 to cover emergency expenses, which
I would say those two numbers are absolutely related, because a lot of times when people don't have the money, they just develop a dysfunctional mentality around it, because it's like, well, I could try to come up with an evacuation plan, but I just literally don't have the resources to actually do it. So I'll just hope that it doesn't happen, and I'll just like not think about it, because otherwise I would just be living with the constant burden of being afraid, right? And I think this is so true about so many elements of our society. We don't acknowledge that people not having the material support, not to mention also not having a lot of like the cultural underpinnings for some of the things that we want them to do, just means that they just develop a dysfunctional moral system around it, a dysfunctional like relationship with it, whether it's our healthcare system when we need them to be getting vaccines, whether it's our like, you know, evacuation system when we need them to be like following orders. Like a lot of people just have not had the incentives. They don't have like the actual environment where like developing these things make sense. So they just don't. Not to mention the, like I said, the cultural underpinnings of thinking that you're invincible, like you're hyper competent, you're hyper rational. And when you put those things together, a lot of people have a lot of reasons for why they wouldn't have an evacuation plan. And I mean, we have to combat that too. That being said, it's stories like this that make me like, whenever I watch Black Mirror, think that half of the episodes just are, you know, clearly being written by someone who doesn't understand like how bad things actually are. Because I'm like, no, you don't understand. Not only is what you're depicting in this episode already here, it's actually worse than you're depicting in this episode. Like the way things are now are actually worse than like the Black Mirror dystopian future. You're just adding like a thin veneer of like a science fiction-y thing to it. But what's happening now is actually worse.
Here. In fact, more than half of Floridians say they have no evacuation plan, and 43% have less than $1,000 to cover emergency expenses, which then raises questions about a two-tier disaster system, which we've heard before. There was outrage in Los Angeles last year when wealthy residents employed private firefighters during the devastating wildfires. The super rich have long had emergency bunkers, places to survive in the event of nuclear war. On the plus side, it's calm. For now, hurricane predictions are down this year. No major storms yet. But that can change. Life can change in a matter of days. So for now, all eyes on the skies, and maybe more taking to them if they can afford it. Phil Lavelle, Al Jazeera.
Well, private firefighters are different than public firefighters. That's just a situation where people oftentimes don't understand that like what a firefighter, like the public firefighters do, is try to stop the spread of fires. Like if a public firefighter decides that your house is like going to burn down and that it's a better use of their time to like worry about the fire spreading, they're not going to stop your house from burning down. They're not going to run into your home to like help you find like valuables or anything like that. That's just not what they should be doing. And oftentimes like people only really want that because either they have like, you know, we have a very materialistic culture, and we also lack a real recovery system. So like if people lose things, it's very likely that they won't be able to get it back, either like, you know, sentimentally speaking, or even like really speaking, because their insurance won't cover it and our government surely won't help them. Private firefighters are going to like try to put out your building, right? They're going to actually try to like put out your, the fire in your home to the best of their ability. And you saw that kind of like misunderstanding about what firefighters do during those fires from people, rich people essentially, who were like, I thought that like the firefighter would come to my home and like put out the fire. But that's not really what their mandate is, depending on like what the larger scope of the thing is. But yeah, I mean, private fighter fighters is like a crazy, I mean, they've existed for a long time, but I'm just saying. Like, that's just like a misconception of like what, like in a situation like this, a firefighter should be doing. But it's easy for people to make that like misunderstanding because of the values in their life. And again, the circumstances that we have to consider that we live within, that means that if someone loses their house, it's likely that they're going to be deeply, deeply inconvenienced, probably even if you're not wealthy, unrecoverably so, by the lack of a safety net for things like this. It's like triage in an ER. Like, yeah. It's a misunderstanding people have too, like that goes to like why people find, well, not why people, but it's also related to what happened with Building 7 and during 9/11, where a lot of people are like, it was a controlled demolition, and they don't realize that no, after everyone was evacuated who could be evacuated, they just decided to pull the plug, because in their minds, like a firefighter or fighter fighting teams, like they fight fires. They would never just like let the building burn down if they could still be fighting it. They do that all the time because it's not like human life is worth more, right? Our society says that we believe that, and then we don't really like support it, but it's just the case. Like that's their, human life is worth more. And then obviously also like not spreading the fire to uninflamed areas. Just moving to the ballroom, right? It's going to be a military bunker / data center / ballroom / displaced by natural disaster refugee camp. It's going to fill up pretty quickly. It makes no sense. They are on standby until one home needs them. If they support multiple homes, then they may have to choose to. Well, I would imagine that, I would imagine they wouldn't take more business than they could do, but it's a company, so they might actually. My real question about private firefighters, if we're going to be asking those kinds of questions, is where do they get the water to fight fires with, right? Because do they have water that they pay for? Do they pay for big tanks of water? I would hope they wouldn't be allowed to just tap into public fire hydrants when there are fires going on that are being fought by like public firefighters. Gosh, I don't know why I'm having a hard time with that word, but you know what I mean? Like, because that would be like the private sector draining those resources. And now that I said, I'm pretty sure they definitely are going to do that, but whatever. Backdraft. I haven't watched that movie in forever. They have their own hydrants installed. Oh, pretty cool. I mean, if you have the money, why not, right? I'm not professing to have any knowledge of that, but you know what I mean. That would definitely be bad. That would be the most efficient, of course. Well, no, it's the public fire hydrants. I'm getting misinformation from the chat, so we're going to move on. My bias tells me it's public fire hydrants, though. Because, well, the public has access to the water, right? You know what? Let's go across the Pacific to Japan, which is actually dealing with its own extreme weather event. They're in the middle of a really bad heat wave. We covered this a few days ago, I believe. We covered some flooding there too, but they're also in the middle of a very bad heat wave in Japan.
Deep in the darkness, under the greenhouse lights, workers pick flowers. Guided by the glow of lights, away from the harsh summer sun, and that is precisely the point. This farm switched to night harvesting after one of the workers suffered heat stroke.
We've gradually become nocturnal. It's about protecting our bodies and ultimately our lives.
But it is not only the farm workers adapting. These chickens have had to change their ways too. 6 years ago, more than 500 chickens here died during a spell of extreme heat, something this farmer doesn't want repeated.
Around here, there are many days when the maximum temperature goes over 35 degrees Celsius. Chickens don't tend to eat when it's hot, and it's very hard to make them eat. So what we're doing is we wake the chickens up when it's cooler during the night and get them eating then.
Japan's summers are getting hotter. This year, temperatures have repeatedly climbed above 40 degrees Celsius, conditions authorities now classify as kokushobi, or cruelly hot day. The country reported its hottest year on record in 2025.
Gosh, the Japanese language always has words like that. That was pretty good. That's about 95 degrees Fahrenheit, in case you were wondering. 35.
Celsius, conditions authorities
What's
now
it called?
classify
Kokushibo?
as kokushubi, or cruelly hot day. The country reported its hottest year on record in 2025. In July, Japan had 5 consecutive days of temperatures above 40 degrees Celsius, marking its longest streak on record. And in a single week last month, more than 10,800 people were taken to hospital for heat stroke, double the number for the same period in 2025. For workers in Japan's cities, adapting to the heat means finding new ways to cool down. At this warehouse in Osaka, that means stepping inside what is effectively a human refrigerator.
It feels really good. I only went in for about 2 minutes, but even that was enough for all my sweat to dry up.
Oh, I bet that feels amazing.
Japan's government has also encouraged a more relaxed approach to office dress. Its long-running Cool Biz campaign is designed to reduce the need for air conditioning by allowing workers to switch jackets and ties for shorts and t-shirts. But outdoors, there's a limit to what workers can do to adapt to the heat. At this farm, they try to start early in the morning before the sun becomes unbearable. But the ever-rising temperatures are making it harder for them to beat the heat. Cara Legg, Al Jazeera.
Yeah. Now I'm remembering that we definitely covered when they were having that like spate of 40 plus degree Celsius days. I would love to get inside of like a big human-sized freezer. I mean, I guess I've been inside big freezers before, but you know what I mean? Like on a hot day, just like climb into a freezer. Oh, it sounds amazing. The worst part of it is, of course, getting out, though. You know what I mean? But cooler than next year, so that's nice. Oh, yeah, we're in the cool phase. In fact, why don't we touch on El Nino? Because I know a lot of you guys are asking, how is El Nino going to make this worse? How is El Nino going to make this worse? How are we going to be dominated by the boy? Bigger hats is the obvious solution. Well, that guy with the fedora was ahead of the curve. What did that boy do? Walk-in freezers are scary, not going to lie. Is it because you watched a lot of shows in the 90s and early 2000s where people got stuck in walk-in freezers because they told you that they lock behind you? But then you think to yourself, like, why would a walk-in freezer lock behind you? A lot of times they were just making that up. Sometimes in the episode, the handle would break off in the, when inside of the freezer, but it doesn't really make any sense. They feel amazing on a hot day. It's true. El Nino is Spanish for the Nino. That's true. It's actually chilly where I am today. Not to be rude, but it is actually chilly where I am today. Super El Nino, aka Godzilla El Nino. How a record weather event could make 2027 the hottest year ever. Well, I mean, what they really mean until 2028. Because ever makes it sound like
wildfires in Indonesia's central Borneo.
It'll cool down.
Floods and mudslides in Chile. Water levels in the Panama Canal so low that fewer ships are being allowed through. These are all recent events in which a weather phenomenon called El Nino is likely playing a part. And it's probably just the beginning. This El Nino is shaping up to be a big one.
I have never seen a forecast that looks like this. The strength of the El Nino in our forecasts is already at very high levels, even at this early stage. It peaks in November, December, and by that stage, it looks very much like it's going to be a record event, the biggest in recent history, the biggest in living memory, and perhaps even the biggest for over a century.
Every 2 to 7 years, something happens in the tropical Pacific. Trade winds, which usually blow east to west, stall, or sometimes reverse. That means the warm water that typically accumulates in the western Pacific spreads eastwards. Rainfall patterns across the Pacific are disrupted, with knock-on effects worldwide for a year or more. Like failing monsoons in South Asia to drought in Australia and winter storms in the UK and Ireland. Global temperatures spike too. Combined with the effects of climate change, 2027 is predicted to be the hottest on record. Average sea surface temperatures are expected to be 3 degrees Celsius warmer than normal in some regions.
We've not had an El Nino like this on top of the level of global warming that we now have. That means that if we look at places that normally suffer drought and high temperatures during El Nino, that this time those impacts are on top of elevated warming that lying underneath that, and so that's what's going to take it to unprecedented levels.
An advanced glimpse, perhaps, of the heat the world can expect in the years to come. Rory Challens, Al Jazeera.
Oh yeah, this guy gets it. Strongest El Nino of the century is coming. I don't think I need to stress you guys out about more weather stuff, though. Man, what a day we've had so far. Should we end it? Do you think we should end it? I mean, I have more stories to cover. I do want to get a burger, though. Huh. Joy. I guess it'll be evacuating next year. Where? I mean, a lot of people will be evacuating next year for sure. Is the Sunday service still going down? I can't say. It's Saturday. Oh, I did want to cover this story. So, well, not this story specifically, but I will do a bit of a sort of short story break in between the larger story I wanted to cover, especially since we've been talking about, well, this is actually also bad. I was going to say, because we've been talking about dire stuff, but no, this is also going to be a little bit of a downer, but a shorter story. So, kindergarten vaccine exemptions are at record levels. No DUI cops today. Well, maybe. We'll see. Thank you for the 501 tip, doot. But yeah, I wanted to keep up with like the RFK juniorification of our healthcare system. And so this year, kindergarten vaccine exemptions in the United States are at a record level. So that means that more than ever, parents are getting exemptions for their kids in kindergarten so they do not have to get their vaccinations. Measles outbreak is going on still, in case you're wondering.
It is that time of year when kids get ready to go back to school. I know that that's the case in my household. And as they're all heading back into the classroom, the CDC is out with new vaccination data. The number of children exempted from vaccine requirements was up to 4.2%. That's an estimated 155,000 kids across the country during the 2025 and 2026 school year. Dr. Michael Bingham is the Chief Quality Officer and Pediatric Intensive Care Physician at Akron Children's Hospital. Dr. Bingham, thanks for being with us. Tell us how...
Well, I mean, he's going to explain it too, but you got to understand, a lot of people don't understand how herd immunity works and how this is also like just going to exacerbate the end of it, but he'll get to that probably.
Physician at Akron Children's Hospital. Dr. Bingham, thanks for being with us. Tell us, how sizable is this increase in exemptions and how do they work?
Well, I think the increase in exemptions is material, right? The CDC is reporting that. And I think we think about the whole number, but then we also think about the individual children and their risk if they're unimmunized. And I think one of the drivers of that that's really been interesting to us is the conflicting information facing families and caregivers of these young children and how they are gaining the information to better understand their vaccination or immunization decisions for their child.
And we have...
It's crazy because the conflicting information, and by that I mean like the bad information, the anti-science information is coming from the government, right? It's just mostly coming from RFK Jr. and the people that the Trump administration and the Maha agenda have empowered. Not to mention the new vaccine recommendations, which are going to have like an impact on the vaccine adherence amongst the population as well. Because we also talked about that, the Trump administration changing the vaccine recommendations. And we also talked about him doing that because that's another one of those populations, like those subpopulations of his voters who are very single issue and he can still appeal to despite like ruining so much of the other, the other parts of our population's lives. And so he's definitely amping up some of the anti-vaxxer stuff because he knows he can still appeal to those people with these kinds of like shiny baubles. But yeah, it's going to have a real negative impact on a lot of people's children, honestly. And it's the kind of thing that is really, 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 really destructive, but a lot of people can't understand it until something bad happens. Like a lot of parts of our society, people cannot understand it because like they have been fed a steady diet of various types of propaganda until it happens to them. And then by that point, it's ultimately too late. And it's a real shame when it's something like this, which is your child's health, because you can also kind of feel bad for people because you know at least partially why they don't like this idea of getting their kid vaccinated is because they're afraid of something bad happening to their kid because they've been fed a steady diet of misinformation about that. And also because it's a baby, right? A lot of people have that incredibly shallow view of it where it's like, it's a baby. It's my baby. Nothing could be wrong with my baby if there's not something visibly wrong with my baby right now. So why get a vaccine and have something like that kind of happen to my baby? And by that, I mean, like, why make the proactive choice to maybe introduce something that might hurt my baby to my baby when nothing is hurting him right now? And I've never known anybody who's gotten the measles or polio or any of those diseases that we've stamped out that they think that probably don't exist. And well, you know what? We're going to see a lot of people have to deal with that now. I mean, people are already dealing with that with the measles, but even more people are going to have to deal with that with perhaps even more deleterious diseases if this doesn't stop.
Have up a list of some of the commonly required vaccines for children. What do they do? Why, in your opinion, are they very important? Are there any on that list that you think are critical that parents really need to make sure that their children get before they go into school?
Well, I think there's these are great conversations to have with a pediatrician or your trusted caregiver. The healthcare system is really committed to the health of your child, and I think for decades and decades we've tried to meet families with their healthcare decisions for their child. And I think what we know is that any singular vaccine does a significant reduction in the risk of acquiring an infection. And moreover, we know that families are really challenged when facing the conflicting information that's out there, and they're not certain about what the right vaccines might be.
Right, and it's more challenging because vaccine requirements are set at a state and local level when we're talking about schools, and we've been getting some different guidance from the federal government. Earlier this month, President Trump signed an executive order calling for reduced immunizations for children. In my experience,
different diseases have different herd immunity levels. It really ranges. Like you'd have to like pull up the different diseases, the different like particular maladies. They tend to, I think, be between like 5 and 15%. We could pull them up, but I mean, we'll let the video finish first, and I'll show you. It's not the same amount for each disease in terms of herd immunity. It's just based on like a variety of factors.
All parents are generally trying to just do what's best for their families. This can be confusing. So what is your message to parents, especially because you mentioned you have this relationship with your doctors, but that's not the way that the healthcare system necessarily works for all families. They don't necessarily have this trusted relationship with their doctor.
Yeah, I think what we've actually at Akron Children's, we've tried to better understand families and their navigation of the information that they're facing. And I think what we've learned is they are getting an enormous amount of information, often quite conflicting. And what we know is that they're sometimes uncertain about the right direction, and sometimes even second guessing decisions they've already made as they're trying to navigate that journey. I think what we've learned is they have proven that they they do trust their children's hospital, they trust their healthcare providers. And I think as folks are sort of engaging with all of the sources of information that's out there, I think what we've heard from families loud and clear is that their pediatrician is a great source to validate the information they've heard or help resolve the conflicting information that they're hearing.
All right, Dr. Mike.
From the government, of course, and online and like Facebook groups. But this is also exacerbated by people having an incredibly, I think, toxic relationship oftentimes with the healthcare system or the idea of the healthcare system, even if they have individual doctors that they like. Because oftentimes by nature of how we've alienated people from the healthcare system by having it tied to a lot of like incredibly exploitative systems, whether it's like the employment-based healthcare system or, you know, we're trying to do some sort of like Frankenstein the private-public option. Most people's healthcare is mediated through the private market in one way or another. We know people have lost access as a result of like the Obamacare subsidies being rolled back like at the end of last year. I think 4 million people. And that leads to, like I was talking about when it came to the evacuation plan, that leads to the kinds of material circumstances that lead people to have a dysfunctional relationship with the idea of healthcare and public health and health as, just like a big bucket of things, because they don't have access to it. Their interactions with it have been negative, right? And so it's easy for them to develop like a dysfunctional relationship with the entire genre of health, which makes them very susceptible to anti-vaxxer propaganda, which, is ultimately how we got to the place we are now, right? Because we're not the end stage of it, but we are at a precipitous point in this, and we got here because of the decades of that being true. And now that RFK Jr. is at the head of that operation, he's able to like exacerbate the problem. But certainly he's a symptom of these years of people not having faith in the healthcare system, because it's just been, it's been kept from them in a lot of ways. People don't have a long time relationship with the doctor that they've seen for a long time. They go to the doctor at urgent care, which used to be like a WAMU bank, right? Or used to be a barbecue restaurant that went out of business for one reason or another. And they go there every time they have an infection or when they have a kind of like cut that they don't want to just let heal by itself. And otherwise, they likely don't have like a strong relationship with a single care physician. Look up home remedies. I pulled up the estimated herd immunity thresholds. So for measles, it's like 95%. It has to do with a lot of factors, like I said, with how contagious the thing is. Measles is very contagious, so it's higher. Whooping cough, it's like 92%. Polio, 80. Smallpox, 80, 85%. So it ranges. It ranges, like I said, between like 5 to about like 15 or so. But of course, there are ultimately people who fall through the cracks, right? So we, by nature of also like pushing undocumented people to the margins, we do have an issue with a population of people who might be unvaccinated for things existing within our society, who are not going to be encouraged to come in for healthcare because they've been, like I said, pushed to the fringes, which creates a public health crisis as well. That's why people need to be documented and need to be, actually integrated into our society. I hear it takes a minute to see Dr. Grok. I mean, before Dr. Grok, people have always Googled things, right? I'm not going to say that like you have to go to the doctor for everything. That is an over medicalization of America that I think is, well, it's funny that it exists in tandem with people being denied access to the healthcare system, but I'm sure that there's probably literature on how those things operate in kind of like a sensical duality, right? Where we over medicalize things, and then also people are incredibly like alienated from the healthcare system by nature of it being mediated through like private insurance. So it's like, I guess it's kind of like Gattaca. Like if you can't access it, you don't have any access to it. But if you can access it, develop hypochondria. Because you can Google some stuff. Like, oh, I got like a, I don't know, a cough. Like, what does it sound like? Like, because most things, true, like most doctors are also going to tell you like, well, it seems like it's like if it's not an infection that is like life threatening, a lot of doctors are just going to be like, well, let's wait and see, right? Like if it's not something that's going to like kill you, like what do you want them to do, right? You like a lot of Americans like, oh, I want an antibiotic. Like why? Like what? I want an antibiotic. You want an antibiotic for everything? You have a little bit of a cold, you want an antibiotic? That's how we get like super bugs. Please don't Google cough. Yeah, no. What does this rash look like? This eczema? It's probably eczema. Well. Anti-vax. Okie dokie. So I wanted to cover an update on the Hind Rajab story. I know the killing took place a while ago. I'm sure many of you haven't forgotten, but only recently was there an investigation launched into it, a criminal investigation by the Israeli government launched into it. And along with that, they have also ended an investigation into the World Chef Kitchen. I forget the exact acronym, but that incident that took place I forget how long ago, because that's what they do. They sit on these investigations until like people have kind of forgotten them because they've done a lot more atrocities since then. But this is the one that got like Nancy Pelosi to finally speak out because one of the people killed was a constituent in her area. And so yeah, they had the follow up on both of those stories that I wanted to. We concluded the investigation and found ourselves to be the victims, and you are anti-Semitic for bringing it up. The Australian government has also responded to this because one of the people killed in that convoy of the aid workers, the World Kitchen convoy of aid workers, was Australian. So I'm sure the Australian listeners, who are probably all asleep now because it's like 2 o'clock in the morning there probably, have seen this already, but we can do both this and the other one. Yeah. Okay. So let's start this. Oh, of course, I thought you would possibly like get this without me saying it, but obviously this is going to be very like triggering if you're, sensitive to this kind of stuff. So let me just provide that blanket warning for you, because I'm of course going to play it because we have to listen to stuff like this. But I do want to acknowledge that of course you might be triggered by this. And as always, I'll read what is being said because it's just like subtitled.
انتوا متخبيين؟ في السيارة احنا جنبينا الدبابة. انتوا جوا السيارة؟
This was the last phone call 5-year-old Palestinian Hind Rajab ever made. She was trapped.
So yeah, I'll just go back and read that. I know for some people who are listening and not watching, it can be difficult to keep up if we don't read some of the subtitles. So I'll mute it so you don't have to hear it again, because it is, of course, very traumatizing. But yeah, I'll read it. Hello, they are shooting at us. The Israeli tank is just next to me. Are you taking shelter? We are inside the car and the Israeli tank is just next to us. Are you inside the car? And then, yeah, shots fired.
Trapped in a car, surrounded by the bodies of her aunt, uncle, and 3 cousins, all of whom had been shot dead by the Israeli military. She stayed on the phone with paramedics in Gaza for nearly 3 hours, begging to be rescued. The emergency workers sent to help her were also shot dead, and contact with Hind was eventually lost. While help never reached Hind, her cries of anguish echoed around the world. On Wednesday, the Israeli military said, after reviewing what it called 5 exceptional operational incidents, it would launch criminal investigations into 2 cases, including the killing of Hind Rajab. But the president of the Hind Rajab Foundation told Al Jazeera it's rare for Israeli troops to be held accountable.
if we want to be statistical, in only 0.18% of all cases there have been even a prosecution. All these investigations, it was always about a charade meant to exonerate, to whitewash the culprits rather than convicting them.
So, what you have to understand about that too, because you might wonder, why do they even bother? Because, obviously all the Israelis are not going to care, right? Even if you ask Israeli friendly media who tries to paint it as a kind of a society with a lot of different opinions about stuff like that. And from my impression of even those anecdotes, it tends to be a lot more umbrage being taken with how bad the genocide or stuff like this makes them look, or how bad it's been for their own country, as you can imagine, because they are a Western, America styled country. How bad all of these things that they're doing makes their country look and inconveniences them, and less a disagreement with the overall genocide. So you might ask yourself why they even bother to do the investigations. It's because if you don't do investigations into stuff like this, and people agitate against the UN, you lose the ability to claim to the UN that you actually take care of human rights in these sorts of violations internally, and therefore the UN doesn't have to engage in any kind of real oversight of your country. It's called the principle of complementarity. And so every so often, Israel has to do a lot of these show or charade type investigations, because human rights groups, NGOs, Palestinians and their families who have made it out of Israel agitate enough that if they aren't seen to be doing something, then the UN might do something, which we know that they won't. But it's all part of the charade, right? It's all part of the masquerade. Yaka shit. Thank you for the $5 super chat. Candace just sent an email about Blake Neff, but in the email, she now has merch with the "I can explain it for you, but I can't understand it" line. Devastating. We might get one of those. It was a devastating line. Not as devastating as the name one charge, but that was a pretty devastating line. But yeah, it's all a charade to disrupt any kind of actual accountability from outside of Israel.
To whitewash the culprits rather than convicting them.
Israel's army said it was also investigating the killing of 15 Palestinian paramedics while traveling in a convoy through southern Gaza. Their bodies were found beneath the crushed vehicles they had been traveling in. This case...
Oh yeah, Israel buried them in a mass grave. I mean, well, yeah, that's what happened. I don't know. I was going to say allegedly, but I don't know how else they would have gotten in that mass grave under their vehicles.
So led to global outcry. However, Israel's military said no further action will be taken in 3 of the cases. These include the killing of 7 aid workers with the NGO World Central Kitchen in April 2024 in Deir al-Balah, and 2 separate incidents involving Doctors Without Borders. Critics of the Israeli military say this is an attempt to disregard thousands of other incidents which did not make international headlines. While this announcement might seem like a step towards justice, the family of Hind Rajab say they have no confidence in the investigation. Israel continues to violate the US-brokered ceasefire by launching attacks on Gaza and Palestinians on a near daily basis. Joel Evans, Al Jazeera.
So yeah, they mentioned the investigation into the killings of the World Central Kitchen members. And so I think that's a great bridge, but might as well bring up the response from the Australian government, because like I said, the Australian government is responding because one of its citizens was amongst the aid workers killed. I don't think the US government has responded, but I'm sure they'll release a statement at some point. Just another Israel oopsie. Where is it? Breaking news: Michigan Republican Senate candidate Mike Crotchhurst Rogers. I'm sorry, what? Has asked AIPAC to stop campaigning for him. Even GOP doesn't want that stink on them. Oh yeah, because you have to understand, there was a while where the Democrats were actually united against the idea of Citizens United, and they weren't really united against the idea of money in politics, but the idea of unfettered money in politics was very unattractive to their voters, and also a lot of that money was going to Republicans. Once the Democrats got their own billionaires and got their own super PAC set up, they really started to mostly just defend the idea of money in politics from the standpoint of like the only thing that can stop a bad billionaire is a good billionaire. And for them, a lot of the good billionaires were the tech billionaires. They were like the tech billionaires who were in Silicon Valley, and maybe a few of the, incredibly wealthy producers in Hollywood and a few other well-situated liberals in cosmopolitan centers. When, and they wanted to make it seem as though, well, two things were true: that you could take money from large donors and not owe them anything. They could just give it to you and you'd not be beholden to them. But also that there was no such thing as like bad money, because they didn't want people, especially on the left, to agitate that like, well, just don't take that money because it's going to make you less competitive. They wanted to create this idea of like value neutral money that can always be used without any kind of real like consequence, because even if you take it from somebody that people think is bad, you're using it for a good reason. And so how could people be mad at you without being like, not realistic about what the modern election financial needs are? But like we're seeing with Elon, like we're seeing with AIPAC, that's being disabused of people in real time, especially as social media and also more effective ground games from like organizing bodies like the DSA are able to make people accountable for taking bad money that is associated with like industries or nations or whatever that make people unhappy, right? And so you're still getting, I think, a little bit of pushback from Democrats about this idea of, and Democrats and Republicans about this idea of like, well, we shouldn't take money, because they just don't want you to get in between them and money. They want you to just accept that money doesn't make any real demands of them, obviously a lie, and that like even if it did, they need it, and there's nothing that it's going to do negatively to counterbalance taking it. And it's just not true. People can see it now. Like money has a cost, right? We knew this from the beginning, but now it's becoming obvious and hard to deny. Money has a cost when you take it, and AIPAC money is not going to work. We've seen Elon money not work. After Meta has to deal with this whole lawsuit about children, it might not work for Meta. Data center money might be toxic. Like it just might be toxic to fund from a lot of these sources, which just means that they'll pass laws to obfuscate where it comes from more. Like, oh no, not only is money speech, but like now you're not even allowed to ask how much money they've raised. They gave it to me because I already agree with them. I mean, because they already agree with me. Yeah, which one of these tabs has that? Oh, here we go. Australia outraged over Israel decision to close probe into aid worker killings. The dark money is not dark enough.
Their deaths triggered global shock and renewed calls to protect aid workers in Gaza. More than 2 years on, Australia's top diplomat is angry.
Australia is outraged by the Israeli government's decision to not pursue any criminal proceedings against those responsible for killing Zomi Frankum and her World Central Kitchen colleagues.
The Israeli strike hit the World Central Kitchen convoy after it had unloaded more than 100 tons of food aid in Gaza. 7 workers died, and the charity immediately suspended its operations.
We have been reviewing the incident in the highest levels to understand the circumstances of what happened.
At the time, Israel promised a full investigation. This week, its military published findings from 5 internal probes, including the death of 5-year-old Hind Rajab. 2 of the cases are now facing criminal investigations, but not the World Central Kitchen killings. The IDF says there is no basis for charges, that the convoy's armed guard had not been flagged, and so troops mistakenly identified him as a Hamas fighter. Australia's foreign minister summoned Israel's ambassador over the decision.
But in the end, one must also understand that not every case where someone dies as a casualty, it means that there's criminal liability. One cannot attack findings of a court if the findings are not suitable to one's political agenda.
World Central Kitchen says it fundamentally disagrees with the military prosecutor's findings and the decision to not pursue charges, adding it continues to grieve the loss of its friends.
Another W for self-regulation. Another W for self-regulation. Don't we just love it, folks? Don't we love how able these organizations are to regulate themselves? I think there's a whole like press conference.
As I said in my statement this morning, Australia is outraged by the Israeli government's decision to not pursue any criminal proceedings against those responsible for killing Zomi Frankham and her World Central Kitchen colleagues. Australian government learned of Israel's decision late last night, moments before it was announced, on World Humanitarian Day. It is the day we commemorate humanitarian workers lost and celebrate and commend the work of humanity.
Damn, that's some real supervillain shit. They released that they weren't going to do anything about it on the day that you used to honor these kinds of people.
Humanitarians everywhere. We had just launched the Zomi Frankham Humanitarian Award. And we didn't have the opportunity to inform Zomi's family before Israel's decision was made public because of the lack of notice. To learn of these developments in these circumstances was especially insulting and hurtful to Zomi's loved ones, to humanitarians, and to Australians. And today I called in Ambassador Hillel Newman, the Israeli ambassador to Australia. And I made clear to him Australia's views.
Expel him.
That Israel's decision falls far short of the accountability we expect. And last night, Australia's ambassador to Israel conveyed the same message directly to Israeli authorities, including the Office of the Foreign Minister. There are still many unanswered questions. These include why, even if the first strike was a catastrophic error, 2 further strikes followed, each 2 minutes apart. As Mark Binskin concluded in his public report, these strikes were in violation of Israeli Defence Force standard operating procedures and rules of engagement. We still have not had a satisfactory explanation of why the strike occurred in a humanitarian fire control zone, and after High Command had directed the brigade commander not to engage the convoy. We have not had a satisfactory explanation regarding the senior brigade officer involved in the strikes being a signatory to a letter to the IDF Chief of the General Staff calling for aid to be restricted to Gaza. We have not received the drone audio as requested multiple times by the government on behalf of Zomi's family. The Australian government does not believe that the...
honestly, sounds like a targeted attack on aid workers and sounds like a cover-up, right? So they seem to be suggesting that the person who ordered the strike was someone who literally wrote that he wanted to restrict aid in Gaza, probably for genocidal reasons, maybe for other reasons I can't imagine. And they're hiding the audio of the strike. I mean, come on. This is not even a good charade.
Removal of 2 officers from their positions and 3 officers being reprimanded is sufficient accountability for the deaths of 7 people, including an Australian citizen. And we do not have confidence in the IDF's Military Advocate General's process, given the many unanswered questions. And I would note this follows a case where the former Military Advocate General was arrested after allegedly acting as a whistleblower and leaking surveillance footage showing Israeli soldiers abusing Palestinian detainees. I have said many times, and I say it again, democracies seek and accept higher standards. The Australian government will continue to keep pressing Israel for justice for Zomi and her colleagues, and we will consult with Zomi Frankham's family before we announce further steps. In my meeting with the Israeli ambassador, I also raised the Israeli government's publication of a tender for the E1 settlement. It is a project which the United Kingdom has described as an unacceptable and destructive act, and Australia agrees with the United Kingdom, and we call for the tender to be retracted, which I communicated to the ambassador. As I said to him, we believe there will be no peace for Israelis or Palestinians without a 2-state solution. Happy to take questions.
Minister, as he was leaving here, the ambassador said, what does it mean?
Except still parroting the 2-state solution talking point. They're just stuck in the past. They just can't admit that they were asleep at the wheel and also complicit. And but I don't mean the West. with Israel making the two-state solution not a possibility. And now they have to think of something different, which is just a total integration of Israel and Palestine. Because a two-state solution, unless you're willing to displace a ton of Israelis from the West Bank, which Israel will not allow, and Western countries will start to start to trouble themselves over, start to well, what's going to happen if we allow Palestinians to rule over Israelis on their own land? Will they be in trouble? Will it just cause trouble? Maybe it's just not really a practical solution at this point for a lot of reasons. But I always say, when you hear people talking about these impractical solutions that it's way too late to employ and solve and do stuff like that, remember, this is the way our governments treat every problem that's also too late to solve. This is the way they talk about climate change. This is the way they talk about any number of things that the point in which we could implement a solution that would be good for mitigating the problem is already way in the past. But they were not advocating for it back then. Now they're just stalling. When they stop stalling, who can say? And obviously it's going to depend, country by country, but a lot of this is just stalling. Not stalling,
Justice.
Stalling.
Do you lynch people in the street? What does justice look like, or should justice look like for the Franklin family? And can you explain why you haven't expelled the ambassador when so many people are asking you to do that?
Well, I don't want to speak for Mal from Franklin and the family. I was with him just a few hours before this news broke, and I respect him greatly and what he's done in the years in the time since his sister's passing and the way he secured her legacy. I'll leave the family to speak for themselves. What I would say to you, Mark, is, and you've probably heard me say it previously, we don't maintain diplomatic relations as an endorsement of any particular country. We maintain those relationships because they enable us to engage in order to advance Australia's interests. And that is what we do. Removing an ambassador would remove our ability to be able to engage, press for Australia's interests, and on this, relevantly here, to put the views of Australia and Australia and on an ongoing basis of Zomi's family to the Israeli.
Can't make eye contact. Yeah, that's it. So are you going to do anything that signals that you are actually dissatisfied with Israel? No, because that would show that we're dissatisfied with Israel, and that would create problems with Israel. It's but you have problems with Israel. They killed one of our citizens and they're not doing anything about it. That's the problem. What's the consequence for that problem? We'll have another conversation about it.
On an ongoing basis of Zomi's family to the Israeli government.
Minister, can I ask just in terms of the drone strike audio, Hillel Newman, the Israeli ambassador, was asked about this directly at the press club months ago, yet today he was again saying it's not up to him, he doesn't have any more information, it's something for the Israeli Defence Forces. One of the questions that has been raised is whether or not you should expel him specifically and ask Israel to send somebody who can actually be someone you work with. Is that being contemplated? And what do you think of his ongoing reticence to actually deal with an issue that he said months ago he would deal with?
Our position on the drone footage audio is being clear and consistent. We have called for that consistently at a range of levels of government, including by me. In relation to his presence, I deal with Ambassador Hillel as a representative of the government of Israel.
Minister, the ambassador also said in his comments that this decision was the result of a legal process, that you can't just dismiss that if you disagree with the decision of this legal process. Do you have confidence in the legal processes? It sounds like you don't.
Well, we believe, the Australian government believes that this decision fails to engage with key questions that have been raised in the Binskin inquiry and subsequently. So that is the first point. The second point, and this is very important, this is not the conclusion of an investigation and a court trial, etc. It is a decision not to proceed with any criminal investigation whatsoever. So, it is a decision not to proceed with any criminal investigation whatsoever.
Okay.
We want answers to the questions, including those outlined.
But that's not an answer to the question he asked, because he asked you, do you feel like, this signals a lack of like seriousness from the Israeli government? Like, do you have a lack of faith, I should say, in their like, seriousness on this case, essentially. And like, she's just like, well, what you don't understand is that they're not even like looking into it, as though that's like a rebuttal to what he's saying. Like, but it's not. It's like that's part of the process, that they decide whether or not it's worth even looking into. And so if they're not even looking into it, then the answer should be, well, no, I don't have faith in that system, because like they're not looking into something that we have already determined is at the very least worth looking into as part of a criminal case or something.
Decision not to proceed with any criminal investigation whatsoever. We want answers to the questions, including those outlined, and we want accountability.
Moody says the bin skin inquiry is the Australian investigation into the assassination of Zomi Frankham without the evidence Wong is saying they request but do not receive. Result is we need this. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't super familiar with the inquiry that they did. But yeah, like it sounds like they're not turning over the evidence in order to have like a real investigation, which would to me indicate that they're not, interested in having a serious investigation into this. But she doesn't want to answer that question. She doesn't want to answer the question that the Israeli justice system, that the Israeli investigation system is just not like, it's not geared towards actually litigating these things fairly, whether it's for Palestinians or for like aid workers from the West, because she doesn't want to, get on the wrong side of Israel and the Israeli donors, but also start to like disabuse people of these like core notions about Israel, that they're not operating on the wrong side of these things, because that also implicates like, the United States, it implicates Western institutions and Western governments who have been facilitating this the entire time. So it's like a really thin line they have to like actually tread when it comes to criticizing Israel without upsetting Israel, and also like, essentially getting blowback on themselves for facilitating Israel for so long. Because it would actually demand action. If you say, well, we don't believe that this investigation is being handled appropriately, like, then what are you actually going to do about it? Like, are you going to, call for sanctions against Israel? Are you going to go to the UN? Like, what are you going to do about it? Instead, you can just go like, well, like the thing is, they're not even doing an investigation, so I can't say if they're doing it right. It's like, yes, you can. Of course you can.
1, 2, 3.
Minister, what further steps could you consider?
Well, I would consult with Zomi's family on that.
Would you be interested in the International Criminal Court or a similar body looking at this? And could you comment on the fact...
Why would you need to consult with the family of the person assassinated by Israel on what you should do next? That sounds like it makes sense, but it actually doesn't make sense at all. Like, imagine if the government had to consult with the family of a murder victim on whether or not to like charge the murderer with their murder. That's not what the government does. Like, what? You're going to consult with the family? You're going to consult with the why would that be? I mean, yeah, like you got to consider their wishes respectfully, but like you should not go after Israel if they tell you not to. Like what that doesn't make any sense. That's not how the law works.
We want accountability. We want answers to the questions, including those outlined, and we want accountability. 1, 2, 3.
Minister, what further steps could you consider?
Well, I would consult with Zomi's family on that.
Would you be interested in the International Criminal Court or a similar body looking at this? And could you comment on the fact, Mark Vinson in his report, he spoke about procedural failures, that it wasn't necessarily a deliberate targeting of the workers themselves. Why are you going further necessarily than what he found?
Well, no, actually, I don't agree with the way you've put that, Matthew. First, in relation to the ICC, that obviously they have they're an independent body and they have mechanisms available to them. But you asked me about ACM Binskin's report. The statement he made that you have referenced, he made clear it was based on the information.
Damn, she's afraid of upsetting Israel. Gosh, I don't listen to her talk a lot, but I mean, I hope this is not just because she's talking about Israel, because she seems so afraid of like upsetting like the people who killed this lady, right? Doesn't it seem that way?
You asked me about ACM Binskin's report. The statement he made that you have referenced, he made clear it was based on the information available to him, and was not all of the information, and it did not deal with the questions. There was no answer to the questions that I have outlined at the commencement of this press conference. Phil.
So, in your words, how would you describe the status of the bilateral relationship between Australia and Israel?
Well, I think we have an Australian humanitarian worker who was killed not on the first strike, but in the context of 3 separate strikes on a humanitarian convoy. I mean, obviously this is a difficult time in the relationship. We've made our views clear about this issue. We've made our views clear about other issues. You've seen the Netanyahu government's response to some of those. I think we are realistic about that.
Minister, in his comments today, the ambassador also suggested that the convoy didn't properly alert Israeli authorities and was carrying armed personnel with it. What's your response?
Well, I think not that. Well, I'd encourage. I released the Binskin report, and I'd encourage people to look at that in response to some of those. But I think the questions that I outlined at the commencement of this press conference remain unanswered.
1, 0, liftoff.
Everyday history unfolds. Sorry, that was a crazy transition. Wow, that was incredibly cucked. I don't think I've seen a politician cuck to Israel that hard in a while. It's been a little while since we've seen someone like that. But to be fair, we don't watch a lot of American media. They tend to be more full-throated in their cuckery, though. They tend to be a lot more like, I love Israel. Like, when you have John Fetterman on the screen, that's what I'm used to. Like, not someone who is, like, going along with it, but seemingly uncomfortable. I'm used to, like, John Fetterman being on screen going, like, I love Israel. If you say something bad about Israel, I'll grind your bones to make my bread. I love Israel. Pennsylvania where? Pennsylvania who? That's what I'm used to, to be perfectly honest. Since Starmer. Oh, yeah, yeah, Starmer. Stammering Starmer loved to talk about, like, how much he was, like, into Israel, too. Gosh, yeah, but he wasn't, but he was into it, too. Like, he wasn't even trying to come across as not into it. If anything, he was afraid of not seeming as into it as he needed to. Okay. Someone mentioned this in the chat, and I do want to get to it as well, but I feel like because Israel has called for, I mean, not Israel. Well, Israel's called for a lot of things, but Turkey, Erdogan has called for the warrant for, here you go. Turkey seeks arrest warrant for Israeli PM Netanyahu. So the tensions between Turkey and Israel have been heightening for a while now. Like, Israel's already looking towards Turkey as their next, like, villainous foil in the region. And they have been striking Turkish targets in Syria. They've been striking Syria for a while. But they've been striking Turkish targets in Syria, and then they were also incredibly mad, obviously, about the F-35 deal that Trump was making with Turkey as well, because they view any big, powerful state in the region as like a threat to their hegemony, and Turkey is just another state like that. But yeah, so Turkey has called for the arrest of PM Netanyahu. A lot of people are.
Now, Turkey and Israel traded insults on Friday after Ankara announced it was seeking an international arrest warrant for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, accusing him of genocide because of the interception of an aid flotilla bound for Gaza. The arrest of some 430 activists in May caused outcry. Netanyahu's office accused Turkey of hypocrisy, and Turkey responded by saying the comments were outrageous. We got analysis earlier from Turkey correspondent Jasper Mortimer.
Turkey has been helping Syria to rebuild.
No. They also accused them of anti-Semitism. Don't minimize it. They also accused Turkey of anti-Semitism.
Its army. Now, before Syria imploded in civil war, Syria was the one neighbor that Turkey feared. It's a significant military power that had done well against Israel in the 1973 war and which had never made peace with Israel. So when Israel bombed the Syrian air base in northwestern Syria on Tuesday, saying that Turkey was about to deploy troops at that base. I think Israel was sending two messages. First, it was saying, we're not going to let Syria regain its former military strength. And two, it was saying to Turkey, don't you dare try to help Syria regain its former military strength. Now, I think Turkey's asking Interpol to issue arrest warrants for Netanyahu and 34 others is simply President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's retaliation. Erdogan is not going to attack Israel. He knows that Turkish voters don't see Israel as a threat, so they will not accept Turkish soldiers dying in battle with Israel. I think this is basically Erdogan's legal way, publicly legal way, of getting back at Israel. And I don't think Interpol will actually issue those arrest warrants, because I think Israel will see this as a political move, not a criminal one.
Why does Israel, seeing it as a political move and not a criminal one, prevent Interpol from issuing an arrest warrant? Is that really a qualifying criteria for whether Interpol will release an arrest warrant against you if you think it's a political move? Like if you just say, oh, Israel controls Interpol. I mean, I figured that. I just meant but ostensibly, ostensibly, are you just allowed to go, no, you can't issue a warrant against me because it's political? Because NATO controls Interpol, but Turkey's in NATO for now. Oh gosh, they're already running puff pieces on this Gadi Eisenkot guy who's going to replace Netanyahu if Netanyahu allows for there to be any kind of elections in October. I definitely want to hear the allegations of anti-Semitism against Turkey. Hold on. I'm going to type Turkey anti-Semitic and hope I don't get a cartoon about an anti-Semitic actual bird. I bet I do. It's going to be a Roseanne comic book. Oh, yeah, here it is. Turkey accuses Netanyahu of genocide. Israeli PM calls Erdogan anti-Semitic dictator.
Turkey wants Interpol to arrest Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The International Crime Agency rarely targets sitting heads of state, but the request has escalated a bitter feud between the two former allies. Netanyahu's office says Israel is unimpressed by Turkey's hypocrisy.
Erdogan is an anti-Semitic dictator who massacred Kurds, supports the massacre of the Hamas terrorist organisation and oppresses his own people.
Ankara hit back.
Turkey denounces Netanyahu's petty political tactics to present Turkey as a new threat.
Turkey's Justice Minister says the government has requested an Interpol red notice for Netanyahu and another official, accusing them of crimes against humanity, genocide, torture and more, linked to the Israeli interception of a Gaza-bound aid flotilla carrying some 430 activists in May, which sparked an international outcry. Israeli-Turkish relations broke down in 2010 when IDF soldiers...
You know how they never put the information that it's in international waters? They always just kind of do that soft propaganda that implies that Israel has the right to seize whatever ship they want. They always just go yeah, they seized this flotilla going to Gaza, but they weren't near Gaza, and also they don't really have the right to do that. That's blockades are acts of war. You don't really have the right to do that. But even if you did, you still seize them in international waters. I don't think that was the one that was seized, not even in international waters, but off the island of Crete, actually. But one was seized not even in international waters, but in Greek waters.
Soldiers killed Turkish pro-Palestinian activists while enforcing a naval blockade of Gaza. Relations have been sliding ever since. In June, Erdogan rejected an Israeli push to label Ottoman-era violence against Armenians a genocide and turned the accusation back on Israel, pointing to Gaza. Just last month, Turkey's foreign minister met with Hamas's new leader and his delegation. And last week, Erdogan welcomed Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas to Ankara to deepen ties. The tension isn't just over Gaza. On Thursday, Israel struck a Syrian base it said was being used for a Turkish military buildup, a strike Turkey condemned And one more flashpoint fueling the row.
Turning now to some other news, former British and French diplomats are urging action over what they say is Israel's erasure of Palestine. More than 100 of those diplomats have penned a letter to the French president and the British prime minister calling for a ban on trade and arms sales to press Israel to accept a Palestinian state. The unprecedented joint letter directly accuses Israel.
Yeah, it's really fucked up that like they're trying to like genocide mock each other. They're like, well, why don't you acknowledge the Armenian genocide before we acknowledge the genocide we're doing?
Palestinian state. The unprecedented joint letter directly accuses Israel of ethnic cleansing and warns that the world no longer sees it as a genuine democracy. We can now bring in our Jerusalem correspondent, Noga Tarnopolsky. So, Noga, how significant is this letter?
Good to see you, Catherine. It's hard to know. Obviously, this is part of an escalating international wave of condemnation aimed at Israel that follows this publication of a tender for the construction of 1,200 building units in this area between Jerusalem and the Judean desert that's called E1, defined as E1 in the Oslo Accords, which were guaranteed by the international community. So it's not out of the blue that these diplomats would speak out. That said, their letter follows a pretty harsh condemnation of Israel from the current diplomats and the current leaders of more than a dozen Western countries. Late last night, I think very importantly, the United States lended its voice to this condemnation, perhaps a little less harshly than European countries, but the United States made it very clear again through the State Department that Donald Trump does not support an Israeli takeover of the West Bank. So what we're seeing is Israel extremely isolated in this respect. The Israeli government catering almost entirely to its most right-wing radical electoral base. There's no reaction so far from Israel, either to the diplomat's letter or to the condemnation from these nations themselves. And I should add, 8 Arab and Muslim nations also added their voices to this, including 3 countries that are of supreme importance to Israel: Egypt, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates, with which Israel has important diplomatic ties.
And Noga, you mentioned there those upcoming elections and some of this playing to a domestic audience. What's your reading of the timing of this letter?
Well, in a way, I think that the timing of this letter is unfortunate because it could have come many years ago. The Israeli cabinet is explicitly pro-annexation of the West Bank, as is the prime minister of the country. So it's a little perplexing that the international community has waited so long. And
I mean, I feel like so are most Israelis too, right? Like, I mean, we only ever really hear, like I said, Israelis quibbling about the process, right? There are definitely some Israelis who are against the whole thing, right? Because it's been a country for a while now. And so there are people who have been there, who have been born there, who have been, radicalized by what they've seen, as opposed to like have come there because they're radicals. But mostly, and I see this from this lady when she's on these interviews. Like, I guess I get her vibe because she's watching her country like crumble around her. Like, she's watching like the people in her country who I'm sure she has like some affection for, like create the conditions by which they will no longer be allowed to be a kind of country. And I mean, I don't necessarily know what her personal politics are about it, but you see the same thing with American liberals too, where they don't want like the bad behavior of their country to mean that their countrymen and their country itself are endangered, even if that would be the most practical consequence for like what is happening, right? There's like an immunity that they want to pledge for because of just like, well, I live there and my friends live there. But like she's watching like her country essentially in its like death spiral when it comes to international support. Because like the current community is not going to do anything. All of the current leadership is likely going to kick the can down the road until like the very, very moment that they cannot. But it's going to lead into a lot of upheaval within the West that just strips away support from Israel altogether. Like it may not be that this causes any real consequence for Israel for the next 10 years, but undeniably both on the left and on the right in America, and that's all that really matters, right? How America feels about this. There is a deep, deep dissatisfaction rising with Israel. And that is just the end of it. If America decides, and a lot of people just imagine because they have a misunderstanding of our relationship with Israel because they want to absolve America of their responsibility and stuff like this. They just imagine that our relationship with Israel is something that just we can't be extricated from it because we just love Israel so much. Like, no. Any part of the body can be cut off, in the case of like the empire, if it starts to be both like a material negative and a social negative. And that's what's happening with Israel. Like the younger Republicans don't like them really for a variety of reasons. The Democratic Party base is no longer into them. And Israel is just not going to be self-sufficient in the way that it is right now, insofar that it is right now, without the support of America. It's going to open them up to a lot of like negative things, both like formal and informal consequences for these actions. And like, so I'm sure there are Israelis, and we see this in their like polling, we see this in their like on the street interviews. Like a lot of them are just like not completely in denial about that fact. And so that becomes like, well, I have a problem with like the process, but overwhelmingly they want the ethnic cleansing. They're mad that it's making their place in the world less secure, that it's making them more in danger and them more isolated. But like, of course, if they could Thanos snap and remove like most of the Palestinians from like their area, they would just do it. And so like, that's not a really sympathetic position that I wish that all of these people I don't like were gone, but I don't want the consequences of doing my like active genocide, or I'm tired of the war. I'm tired of the consequences of the war on our like country. Like, but that is the sympathetic Western position when it's, Americans shedding it. Like no one sheds a tear for the Israelis now, obviously, but like, before they would have, obviously.
I assume that in part this delay is because of the war and the Hamas attack of October 7th, 2023, which made these sorts of reactions almost impossible. But right now, there's a danger that this letter will not do much more than play into the hands of the Israeli ultra-right wing and this government that so far has not managed to recover in the polls. Thus far, there appears to be no electoral way for this government to be able to reconstitute itself after the elections. And a letter such as this from former diplomats serves Prime Minister Netanyahu and his, I would say, racial supremacist ministers such as Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister who was behind the publication of this tender, by allowing them to say, as they have this weekend, that the whole world is anti-Semitic and that only they can be counted on by Israelis to stand against this anti-Israel wave. Again, so far, this isn't showing really positive results for the government in the polling, but you never know where this will go.
Noga, thank you so much for keeping.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a parody now, and it's going to go in a bad direction. Like, I know where this is going to go. Like, it's going to go in a bad direction. And that's even if Netanyahu doesn't choose to do like a coup because he's afraid of going to jail. The view is held by a large majority of their population. I assume you mean the view of like wanting to ethnically cleanse in one way or another, like, the people of Palestine from Palestine and have it be part of Israel. Oh, for sure. But you got to understand, in the West, like we saw with the, I forget what we were talking about with that parallels this, but that like quibbling over, the nationalism conversation, the Candace Owens nationalism conversation, like there's a desire to pretend that you can like actually express that position. Like you can like, I want to get all the immigrants out of our country. And you don't have to contend with the reality that the only way to do that would be to engage in like a violently repressive regime. And so that the very desire that you're expressing is authoritarian by nature. You can pretend as though like, well, it's fine to just want all of these people who live here on this land gone. And if I just keep expressing that and someone does it in a way that I don't agree with, I don't have to take responsibility for like that. But that's just a type of like, culture of accountability that we feed into. And obviously like individual citizens in America's choice don't matter, obviously, with our government for most things. But it is part of like a complex of reasons why it doesn't matter, because a lot of people are like feeding into this like idea where like, oh, I can express like wanting these things that will inevitably like result or cause like, or rather that will inevitably necessitate like atrocities, but I don't have to take responsibility for the atrocities that they necessitate. Like I can just opine about how like Iran needs or like a new leadership. And I mean, like, again, of course, like we know that Trump didn't make that decision because people wanted it, but it's part of like the culture where people just like are taught to have a lot of these like irrational beliefs about like what can be maintained and how to maintain it. And that includes like, oh, well, I just want my borders to be secure, but I don't want any like human rights violations. You see that too with the like the fucking people, the I was a Trump supporter until ICE took my immigrant people. Like they just don't like, they don't get it. They think these things can be accomplished in a way that doesn't necessitate what they're seeing like right now, but it can't. Which is why, you can't really feel sympathy when they're like, oh no, like a lot of Israelis don't agree with the war. It's like, yeah, but they want to do the genocide. They just don't agree with how it's being done because they want it to be done faster or with less blowback from the international community or without impacting their lives personally. But that's not like at all sympathetic. And it's not like the reason why you should disagree with like the genocide, obviously. Because then you just disagree with like the consequences for you that you hadn't considered. Okie dokie. I have no sympathy for MAGAs, former MAGAs, or Zionists. Thank you for the 5 bits over on Twitch. We're gonna get out of here. I want to go get dinner. I want to go on an adventure. I'm gonna go on an adventure tonight. I don't know what that fucking means, but I definitely want to do it. I'm gonna just go out there into the streets. He says before just going to get a smash burger and some French fries. It's why you have to be like skeptical of like the left-right divide being used as like a lazy heuristic to avoid having real conversations about like what people believe. People love to just go like, I'm left, I'm right. Like most people are just too complex for that to have any real meaning. Because a lot of people are like, oh no, I'm liberal because I think I should be paid more. It's like, no. I'm gonna go for a bike ride. I'm not gonna walk downtown. I'm torn about what I'm gonna do because I kind of just want to go to eat and maybe I'll just get like a drink. But if bars are crowded or whatever, I'm not gonna bother with that because who the hell wants to just be like, who the hell wants to just be out? And so I might just go see Camp Miasma. But it depends. I don't know. I feel like I'm gonna do something a little bit more active. Maybe I'll see a movie tomorrow night. Just like even just walk around, get up to stuff. Gillian Anderson represent, yeah. Do you have any good nature areas around you? Oh, yeah, but it's nighttime. I'm not going to go to like a park in the night. I'm not like a teenager trying to get drunk. Get up to some straight tomfoolery. I don't think I'm going to get up to tomfoolery. I'm going to try not to. Get drunk and ride those city scooters. No, hell no. I know how to ride a normal bike. I'm an adult. Okay. Shenanigans, exactly. Some crazy twin shenanigans. No one's going to get that reference. No one remembers Pepper Ann like I do. Do they give DUIs for drunk biking? I would never bike drunk, nor would I bike drunk while texting. Okay. Take it easy and keep it sleazy. I will see you all on the flip side. Bye-bye.